depends on the pressure that we build now. Today, we bring together lawyers, activists, coaches, cultural figures with one clear message: Zionism has no place in football and in sports in general. We are here to say Israel cannot be part of the 2026 World Cup, and it cannot continue competing in European international football while Palestinians are under siege. I would just like to make a few quick notes before we get on it. This session is going to be live streamed and recorded. Please, any questions that you have throughout it, you can leave it in the Q&A section, and I will try to bring them as we keep speaking. And we will also have, a guided discussion and a moment for everybody watching to take part on this. Very important, links to action are going to be on the chat. So anybody that wants to sign our letters and demands for action, please give them a look. And now let's get with the speakers. We have an incredible lineup, like I said. And Kat Vilarev, I would really like to start with you. You are an expert in sports law and governance who has extensively worked with FIFA and UEFA. So please, the floor is yours. Kat, you are mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. So thank you for the introduction. I have a unique insight into what is going on because I provide legal advice to Palestine Football Association. And I will just try to introduce you to a few things in the short time that I have. I will let others talk about why it's wrong for FIFA and UEFA to include a genocidal, apartheid, occupying, ethnic cleansing, you name it, regime that killed and injured hundreds of thousands and destroyed half of Palestine and its sports. We'll let others talk about it because FIFA and UEFA don't have rules or policies on suspending associations for these reasons. They just do it randomly without any rules. So it's a purely political matter. And as it turns out, everything else is political matter, even when we have clear rules on those issues. If they involve Israel and shielding Israel, those rules will be completely disregarded, even if they have a constitutional nature, so something that comes from FIFA statutes. There are two main legal issues, legal regulatory, that I want to mention. One very, very briefly, and it's related to the fact that everybody talks about how we shouldn't be punishing innocent athletes and clubs and associations for the actions of their governments. But this is not really applicable in case of Israel, because this argument really does not work, because they're all intertwined in Israel with government and with military, like no other football government and military in the world. So they're all forming like one single unit. And we know that big majority of Israeli football players have served in IDF. They're reservists, they are active members, and they cannot represent Israel in international sports without having served in army first. And many of them publicly expressed not just support for IDF action, but have publicly called for destruction of Gaza, or said something else that amounts to genocidal incitement. And Israeli clubs, Israeli football associations all support materially, morally, and in every other way the IDF. They visit air forces, including the chairman of Israel FA, and bring them presents, have dinners with them, and so on. And then they advertise this online. So just in legal terms, we are talking about the disciplinary code that would be applicable to everybody else. As you know, people that have said free Palestine or just had something around their arm, like a band that talks about freedom for Palestine, have been fired and disciplined. And yet we have these others who can call for the destruction of the whole people, and they are still playing in European football clubs completely unbothered. So the disciplinary code has miserably failed. We have, of course, submitted complaint to FIFA, and FIFA has just been passing the bucket to disciplinary committee, and disciplinary committee has just been prolonging and delaying any decision on this issue. And it's been already a year and a half that they are in possession of this knowledge of all these incidents that we have collected. And the second big issue is related to Israeli football clubs that are located in illegal settlements in the West Bank. So Israel Football Association joins these clubs to their leagues. So they go and play in Israel, and then they also host the matches of Israeli leagues on occupied Palestinian territory where they are located. So in essence, they are using Palestine Football Association territory for their own footballing purposes, as if they were their own. And these clubs are built quite literally on the top of Palestinian destroyed homes, destroyed property that was expropriated from them, that just to make way for Israeli settlements and clubs. And Palestinians are not allowed to access these football matches. It's a clear apartheid policy. So we know also that UEFA and FIFA have sent millions of shekels to Israel FA every year as a part of some reciprocal financial relationships in which they earn money from regional and international games in which these teams play. And Israeli settlement clubs actually serve extremist settlers who are very often involved in those acts that you see everywhere on social media, acts against Palestinians, which are amounting to terrorism, vandalism. So this is the issue. The issue is that they have occupied, even in footballing terms, the West Bank territory. So they are organizing their football leagues on Palestinian FA territory. But in FIFA and UEFA statutes, you have a clear territorial integrity rules that prohibit member associations such as Israel and their clubs to play on the territory of another member association without the approval of that other association, and without approval of confederations involved like UEFA and AFC, and without approval of FIFA. So all of these approvals are needed for this to be actually legal, but none of them were ever given to Israel. And in fact, Palestine FA has been formally objecting for the past 13 years and asking for its legal and political jurisdiction over its territory to be reinstated. And but FIFA and UEFA never actually paid attention to this. They just ignored the entire issue, yet not really giving approval to Israel. And if they were so confident in the...
Why do you think all of this impunity? Why do you think they have never really paid attention? Because as you said, Palestinian Football Association has been continually speaking up against this. Why do you think is the impunity? What's behind it?
The issue is completely politicized, entirely politicized. I'm not going to get into details, but there are, even if you look at who is sponsoring FIFA, for instance, just the commercial aspect of it, and which companies are those, and which companies have shares such as Vanguard and BlackRock. They're controlling these companies, or they have pretty big shares in them. It's all clear. They are also investing at the same time, these companies, in Israeli weapons industry and the US weapons industry. So it's all somehow, it is all interconnected. It is all related. The rabbit hole is deep, and the level of interconnections is very wide, and that network is very wide. So there is obviously a political reason. A lobby is very strong. And I will tell you just a second. The story is that in 2016, when Infantino became FIFA president, then Israel Football Association came out and said, wow, this is fantastic news for Israel because he's a friend of Israel. And as long as he's president, we are never going to be sanctioned. It's going to be very, very difficult to sanction us, which is kind of proving true right now. But by including these clubs in their own structures through their participation in Israeli leagues, FIFA and UEFA are actually participating in occupation and colonization of Palestine. Nothing else, because they are normalizing lives in settlements, contrary to the ICJ, who said that these settlements should be completely evacuated. And no, what they're doing is just the opposite to every single UN resolution out there, binding and non-binding, which calls these settlements illegal, which calls them as Palestinian territory. And there is a rule also on admission of a member association that says that any association which is responsible for organizing, supervising football in all its form, in its country, may become a member association. So what is country is well, FIFA statutes say that it's a state recognized as independent by majority of members of the United Nations. And the UN doesn't recognize countries just in abstract, it recognizes them in proper territories, delimited territories. And we know that UN recognizes West Bank entirely as Palestinian territory. So there is no real reason for them, based on any rules that they have or regulation that they have, to in fact keep these clubs at the on Palestinian territory in the West Bank, because this is footballing occupation in which FIFA and UEFA both participate by not sanctioning Israel and by not kicking out these clubs. And yet another interesting fact is in 2014, when Russians joined Crimean clubs into their leagues, just like Israel is, what UEFA did is just quickly kick them out. And guess who was behind that action? Mr. Infantino himself, who was back then a general secretary of UEFA. So the legal and regulatory aspects are crystal clear. I usually look at point of view of another party. What can they say? But there is nothing they can say, absolutely nothing. Yet this is stagnating because FIFA keeps passing the bucket from committee to committee, from procedure to procedure for the past 13 years on this issue. And even now, under these circumstances where we have this absolute disaster happening in Palestine, even now they decide to shield Israel as it commits these acts. So this explains a lot that there is actually a lot of lobbying, a lot of aspects that are not out there, and they in fact pull all the strings. Israel has not just politicized football. In fact, football has always been politicized, but they have militarized football as well, completely. So when you go, for instance, to Paraguay, to FIFA Congress, there will be tanks on the street. Not just commandos with machine guns, there'll be tanks on just for FIFA Congress. They will come, the Israeli delegation comes with a lot of people, bring spies to follow us all around, and so on. So they have turned football into something else. We cannot anymore have normal football in Europe. Everywhere where Israel is playing, there will be either that fans are not allowed in, just to make sure that security is kept. And, this is disrupting a lot of normal organizational matters, which were the argument of both FIFA and UEFA for kicking out Russia, and under completely different circumstances, I might say. Last year, when we submitted our proposal for item to be placed on Congress agenda, and we proposed sanctioning Israel, this is in accordance with FIFA statute, then Israeli Football Association hired government departments and military to, in their own words, to torpedo our proposal and make sure it never reaches the voting stage at FIFA Congress. So I have to emphasize this point. They hired military to assist them in legal issues in football. So FIFA has statutory principle according to which football association must handle their affairs independently. And they constantly kick out associations and suspend them just because of the government interference. And here you have military, government, and Israeli Football Association all functioning together, and nothing is happening. So legally, there is really nothing to be done because FIFA are refusing to make a decision in the case on the illegal settlement clubs. They're delaying, they're procrastinating, and no decision means there is nothing to appeal, and there are no other mechanism to hold FIFA accountable, especially for non-EU football association. It's just FIFA's own internal dispute settlement, and then there is court arbitration for sports. So this issue is taken out of the courts and given to the private settlement procedures. And that's why this is possible for them to do, because there is no accountability mechanism. What is happening at the moment, just one last thing, is that after 2 years of relentless efforts from everyone, not just Palestine FA, starting with campaigners, with fans, activists all over the world, such as Jill Thomson that we have here with us tonight, and then BDS efforts, UN special reporters, UN working groups on business and human rights, EU parliamentarians, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, fair square. I don't want to leave anybody out, but I'm leaving hundreds out. And they all wrote to FIFA and UEFA and all asked the same thing from it. Kick these clubs out now because they are violating law, international human rights, and they are actually supposed to be evacuated. And so immediately apply your own statutes to these clubs. And FIFA and UEFA just ignored them. What I want to also point out is there are a lot of misinformation these days happening. So the latest thing that came out a few days ago is that Israel is about to be banned by UEFA. And even though there are major efforts by several football associations that are working in consortium for many months already to push out this Israel, and they are just trying to make UEFA now organize executive committee meeting, and if there is a vote, if there is a meeting, if there is a vote, they are pretty sure that Israel will be banned. So don't listen to the false news going around at the moment that UEFA has voted already and banned Israel. I wish it were true, but it really isn't. And the person who announced this a few days ago at the Arab conference in the US is from American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. And if you saw that video where he announces this fake news, then he attributed the success to himself and the campaign that was just going for maybe 2 last weeks. He attributed the credit to himself and then asked the participants to, donate. So don't do this. This gives bad name to the campaign, and to the people donating, donate to Gaza instead.
That a vote has not taken place, a meeting has not taken place. These are Zionist tactics that we have seen in the past before to calm down the waters and make us be more slow down. Everything that's happening is about to happen. We need to keep the pressure up. Thank you, Kat, so much for your insight and your perspective. Love it hearing you. Really sorry to cut you off as well. I had to do it, but we have conversation flowing and give the opportunity to others to speak as well. It was an honor, honestly. Like always, I have always learned so much from you about the sports law. So really appreciate you being here. And our next speaker is somebody that for me, she's an ally, a big ally, especially in journalism, because it's not been many of us speaking in the sports side of the genocide and the injustice being made against the Palestinian people. Shireen Ahmed, she's been a brilliant voice, not just in justice, but also in equality and inclusion in sports. So Shireen, it's a real honor to have you with us, and please go on.
Thank you, Leyla. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Hello. I just wanted to state that I'm actually based in Mississauga, Ontario. It's part of the nation of Treaty and Traditional Territory of the Mississaugas, of the Credit First Nation, of Haudenosaunee, and here at Wendat Peoples. I am a settler of immigrant experience, and I did want to say that I'm an immigrant on stolen Indigenous land, which is very key to the conversation we're having today about colonial settler happening and genocide in sport. The city of Mississauga is home to many global Indigenous people and communities. Palestinians are definitely one of them. I do want to thank the Zionist Coalition and everybody who worked, particularly Leyla. Our WhatsApp chats have been going full for years, but particularly in the last couple too. I'm a practicing sports journalist and a professor of journalism and sport media in Toronto. And over the last 23 months, I've watched in horror with the world as a genocide unfolded, the sheer annihilation of beautiful people, futures, families that cannot be undone. I watched in frustration and in sadness as too many journalism colleagues avoided or refused to acknowledge the necessary conversation about justice in sport, and decimation, annihilation of all sport in Gaza and in the region. I've watched too many colleagues of ours, of mine, who were targeted and murdered by the Zionist regime, despite heartfelt cries of journalism to not be a crime in the world, of our colleagues there sharing bravely, selflessly, so we could watch it's just been, it fell silence amidst to a growing rage, distress, and just disillusionment of media and journalism, in so much that in the Western part of the world, so many colleagues have quit in frustration, have reported their experiences. And I tell you, my friends, sport is absolutely no exception. I've watched on and been a part of this. I won't be able to forgive the global community and sports journalism for waiting to call out the murders of our sports journalism colleagues in particular, and anything related to sports, because those stories are a necessary part to chronicle. There have been the murder of football players, FIFA certified coaches, officials. Football youth academies have completely been destroyed. Over 700 athletes, which is a very minimal total. And I do think we need to recognize that the totals that are out there, there's bodies buried under rubble that have not even been collected yet. So those estimates are on the very low side. While creating, and of course, the destruction of facilities and all infrastructure, while creating the highest percent of pediatric amputees in medical history, which is a direct link to para sport. Again, this conversation is being ignored, despite the fearless and constant writings of the small community of people in the world, and in the absolute overlooking of mainstream media and legacy media, that people have been able to stay away from what is considered radioactive. Nobody will venture into this. And be it owners of teams, people in media, these stories and ideas within the sports ecosystem have been completely ignored. I do find myself, I have to say, alhamdulillah, surrounded in solidarity by people like Leyla, Ahmed, Karim Zidane, Dave Zirin, Christopher Curtis, Jonathan Liu, the Center for Global Reporting at the University of British Columbia, Mohammed Rashini. And forgive me if I've missed anyone, but I'm based in North America, so my lens, unfortunately, is out here. Our unwavering friends in Academy, whose public scholarship in sport helps to disseminate truth to power, including Dr. Joel Boykoff, our friends at End of Sport podcast, Dr. Dan Sailovsky. I do want to shout out the Sport Scholars for Justice in Palestine, Faculty for Palestine on various campuses. I'm a member of both. I've been in journalism for 15 years and have been advocating for freedom and justice of Palestinians since I was born. We're not new to this, but historically there has been a precedent of blatant unwillingness of mainstream to not tell these stories about targeting of footballers, shooting at their legs, campaigns. There have been campaigns to boycott FIFA, companies like Puma, who literally have teams on colonized Palestinian lands, the heavy restriction and lack of mobility of football players. There is a precedent, and too few talk about this. Leyla mentioned the tides are shifting. It took 2 years of genocide for tides to shift. I mean, one of the things I do want to say, with all the strength and support from people outside, the voices from within Palestine have always been the most important, and those that should be centered, those from those communities are the best storytellers. They have been telling us for decades and decades since the Nakba, this is what's happening. And now appreciating everybody getting on board, but centering those voices and understanding what is happening is key to being sincere and not disingenuous. I mean, unfortunately, we are aware of certain campaigns that are trying to corporatize or capitalize off this genocide for their own personal, professional success, which is exhausting. I'm sorry, I'm shouting through this entire presentation because I am furious.
We should be furious. We should be very furious, especially. I mean, it's been lonely in the sports journalists. It's been really lonely, but thankfully, and you are proof of it on many present here, that maybe we are not many, but we have been powerful. And I think that's something that Gazans, especially in Gaza, have been appreciated. Maybe we haven't been many, but we have been important. Thank you so much, Shireen, for your work.
Leyla, one last thing I do want to say, because I did write on this. When a football player, and I focus on women in sport, tears her ACL, there's an outpouring of sympathy and emotion for her rehabilitation. The silence from women in sport in particular, as we see a trajectory of upward, the silencing about the femicide in Israel, the decimation of sport, the complete destruction of possibility for women in sport is something that I'm furious about and I'm paying attention to. And I think we all should call to action, support independent local journalists who are writing about this, email their networks, let them know, call in and tell them the stories need to be told. People have power. And that's one of the things that will help us through this particular period. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Shireen. Thank you so much for your words. Honestly, very powerful. And also, I would like to turn now to Nicola. Nicola, joining us from Chile, was the first professional coach of the Palestinian national football team. And he's long spoken about Zionism impact on football. He brings both of the footballing perspective and political from Latin America. Muchas gracias, Nicola. ¿Cómo estás? Cuéntanos.
No, gracias a ti. Voy a hablar en español y trataré de ser lo más breve posible. Antes que nada, agradecer a todos ustedes porque la solidaridad con el pueblo palestino. La solidaridad es el sentimiento más hermoso que puede tener un ser humano, la capacidad de sentir por otros. Así que agradezco tremendamente esa sensibilidad. También agradecer a Roger Water, que ha sido perseguido, que ha sido intentado, agredido, en fin, de todas formas, y él siempre ha estado, y a todos ustedes en general, enviar un saludo fraterno a George Galloway y su familia que se encuentran en este momento viviendo una dictadura que les impide ser, pensar y hablar, que se viste de democracia, pero es una dictadura más. Los profesores del colonialismo y los crímenes de lesa humanidad a través de toda la historia de aquellos países que se dicen del primer mundo, pero construyeron su estabilidad gracias a la precarización de la vida de los países de América Latina, África, Medio Oriente y Asia. Dicho esto, quiero decir que la FIFA no tiene historia, la FIFA tiene prontuario. Es una organización nefasta. Me tocó a mí formar la selección palestina de fútbol, unir a los deportistas palestinos de Gaza, de Cisjordania, de la diáspora, para que estuviera representada en esa selección todo el pueblo palestino. Y nuestro lema era el balón como bandera de lucha. Y sufrimos muchas injusticias por parte de la FIFA. De hecho, en un momento una patrulla militar israelí asesinó a varios jugadores de mi selección y yo protesté a la FIFA en ese entonces, que estaba Joseph Blatter como presidente de la FIFA. Protesté por el asesinato de los jugadores palestinos y lo apunté a él y a toda esa organización nefasta de racistas, porque si esos 7 jugadores asesinados, esos 7 jugadores palestinos asesinados, hubieran sido jugadores de la selección de Francia, de Reino Unido o de Alemania, habría sido un escándalo mundial. La prensa ni siquiera se informó, la gente lo sabía, estaba invisibilizado. Eso es parte de una organización racista, supremacista, discriminatoria, como es la FIFA. De modo que fue muy, muy odioso esto, porque nosotros pedíamos, junto a la Federación de Sudáfrica, y pedíamos la salida del Estado infanticida de la FIFA. Desde ese entonces, no era nuevo. Posteriormente, nosotros hemos visto, y todos lo saben, lo que ha ocurrido permanentemente. Yo justamente renuncié a la selección palestina a seguir conduciéndola. La formé, la entrené, la preparé, creé cursos de formación de técnicos palestinos especialistas para trabajar con niños, como una forma de sacar a los niños de una situación tan terrible como era la ocupación y ver que un día tenían padre y al otro día no tenían padre, que tenían amigos y al otro día no tenían amigos. Entonces, eh, formamos cursos especiales con entrenadores y psicopedagogos para trabajar con los niños palestinos que estaban sufriendo, principalmente en Gaza, ¿no? Sufriendo lo terrible de esta ocupación, una de las ocupaciones más inmorales de la historia de la humanidad. De modo que la FIFA simplemente ante una situación como esta omitía, callaba. El estadio de la selección palestina que fue construido en Gaza con dinero de la FIFA fue bombardeado. Nosotros no teníamos dónde entrenar. Fue bombardeado. Y la FIFA en ese entonces actuó como ciego, sordo y mudo. No dijo absolutamente nada. Entonces, yo me imagino si bombardearan el Estadio Nacional de Francia o bombardearan un estadio, ¿no? O lo que ocurrió en Jabalia cuando una patrulla militar de esquizofrénicos soldados psicópatas, ¿no? Se detuvieron y ametrallaron a los jugadores que entrenaban allí. Mataron 7 jugadores y mataron personas del público. eh, Tantas situaciones de ese estilo. ¿Qué hubiera ocurrido? ¿Qué hubiera ocurrido si en un partido de la selección de Alemania o de la selección británica o francesa una patrulla militar se baja, ametralla al público, a los jugadores? Esto sería, habrían formado una coalición internacional para invadir ese territorio, ¿no? Pero eran palestinos, eran seres inferiores, eran seres de otro color de piel, eran seres que no tenían derecho ni a la dignidad, ni a la libertad, ni a sus derechos más mínimos, como es el principal derecho humano, que es el derecho a la vida, atropellado permanentemente por un Estado infanticida, eh, a vista y paciencia de un mundo occidental mentiroso, hipócrita, cínico, que no solo financia, arma, entrena y protege a su entidad criminal, sino que es partícipe en la medida que le envían armamento letal para ser ocupado contra la población civil, porque para nadie es un secreto de que Gaza está habitado también por civiles, ¿no? El bombardeo con el equivalente a 8 bombas atómicas lanzadas en Hiroshima y en Nagasaki, lanzadas sobre Gaza, a nadie le debe quedar un dejo de duda que es un genocidio, un crimen de lesa humanidad. Y veo a hipócritas y cínicos haciendo análisis si efectivamente allí hay genocidio o no es genocidio. Empiezan con análisis etimológicos de la palabra, si se puede o no se puede aplicar el término genocidio. Bueno, lo que no hacen estos gobiernos lo tiene que hacer la población. En una oportunidad fue invitada la selección de Argentina a jugar al estado infanticida. De inmediato hablé en ese entonces con los jugadores de la selección argentina, hablé con entrenadores, colegas míos de Argentina, y hablé con un gran hombre, un hombre muy solidario como era Diego Maradona, que de inmediato se colocó a trabajar y logramos que la selección argentina no viajara al estado criminal infanticida. Lo mismo ocurrió con Uruguay y lo mismo hacemos siempre que podemos. Yo renuncié a la selección cuando la FIFA organizó un partido, de acuerdo con la Federación del Estado Criminal, organizaron un partido que le llamaron Partido de la Amistad, donde la selección del Estado infanticida se enfrentaría a la selección palestina. Cuando me llama el presidente de la Federación del Estado de los colaboracionistas palestinos, me llama para que yo preparara el equipo, le dije que el Estado criminal no eran amigos míos, un Estado que tenía a más de 7.000 presos políticos palestinos no eran amigos míos, y yo no iba a entrenar esa selección y ningún jugador de mi selección iba a ir a jugar y ninguno fue a jugar ese partido que la FIFA había autorizado para que se hiciera en Barcelona. Así que vuelvo atrás y digo de nuevo, la FIFA no tiene historia, tiene prontuario, tiene un prontuario que es partícipe de los genocidios, partícipe por su silencio. El silencio también es complicidad. Omitir, no hablar, no mencionar, no decir, no actuar, también es una forma de genocidio. Entonces, en ese sentido, yo quizás esté hablando desde el fondo de mi corazón con mucha molestia, porque muchos jugadores míos fueron asesinados, muchachos que los conocí, muchachos que cuando vino la selección de Palestina a hacer el training camp en Chile, había un jugador que era Mohammed Al-Jesh. Lo llaman, estando aquí, jugábamos en un partido amistoso con la selección de Chile, lo llaman para decirle que su familia había sido bombardeada, su casa destruida. Entonces yo le dije al muchacho que tomara un vuelo y se devolviera. Él dijo, no, yo no soy mejor que mis otros hermanos. Y la mayor alegría que les daré a ellos es estar aquí en este campo de fuego, el juego. Y Mohammed Al-Jesh, que también protesté en ese momento ante la FIFA no dijo nada. En un momento nos tuvieron 3 días en la frontera, donde no podíamos salir, teníamos que enfrentar a Nepal en un partido FIFA programado, todo. El Estado sionista cerró la frontera, no dejó salir a mis jugadores y la FIFA no hizo nada. Nos soltaron el mismo día nos soltaron y ese día, ante esa adversidad, los muchachos sacan lo mejor de sí y para vergüenza de la FIFA y para vergüenza del Estado criminal, logramos vencer y pasamos a la otra etapa, a pesar de que los muchachos estaban tremendamente cansados, porque 3 días que no habíamos comido, que no habían bebido, que no habían dormido bien, porque no teníamos dónde ni siquiera sentarnos, porque está en la frontera, ustedes saben lo que es, y quienes son de allá saben lo que es Rafah y todo eso. No teníamos nada, ni agua, ni comida, nada. Entonces, eh, cada vez que recuerdo la belleza humana de esos jóvenes y del pueblo palestino, admiro más y quiero más y siento un gran respeto por ese pueblo que resiste en Gaza, pero también con gente como ustedes, que no siendo palestinos, sufren, luchan y son perseguidos, acosados por todo ese poder de información, desinformación y coerción que tiene el Estado infanticida a nivel mundial. Esa gente del deporte, esos jugadores que no fueron a jugar al estado infanticida en solidaridad con los jugadores y entrenadores del pueblo palestino, esas son la belleza de la humanidad, esos son la reserva de decencia, de dignidad de una humanidad que está siendo tremendamente avergonzada en este momento, donde todo el mundo observa un crimen como el que se comete en Gaza, como el que se comete en Cisjordania, y perdonen que me entienda, los crímenes que se cometen en el Sahara Occidental con el pueblo saharaui y tantos crímenes que se han cometido a través de la historia, entonces ya es hora de que la humanidad se rebele contra esos poderes fácticos que lo que hacen es insultar el término humanidad. Yo cada día recuerdo esa, no sé el nombre de la persona que lo dijo, ¿no? Pero esa persona pasó a la historia, aquella persona que dijo, mientras más conozco a los hombres, más amo a mi perro. Bueno, es una realidad tan grande. Entonces, la humanidad se ha suicidado, se suicida a sí misma día a día. Es un deber obligatorio de todo ser humano no luchar por el pueblo palestino. No digo que luchen por el pueblo palestino, que luchen por los valores de la humanidad, por los
Los
valores
derechos
de la
humanos.
justicia,
Sí,
por los
señor.
valores de la esencia. Quizás me extendió, Leila, tú me avisas, me tiras del cordón nomás si me extendió.
Ya casi te toca, pero era muy importante escucharte. Muchas gracias, Nicola.
No, gracias a ti y a todos ustedes.
Has really reminded us of what Palestinian athletes, Palestinian players have been put through, especially, well, we have seen them making history during the World Cup qualifiers. including players from Gaza who had their families undergoing genocide, and how FIFA does put these players under and just unimaginable pressure. I remember Mahmoud Wadi, I'm sorry, just 30 minutes before training with the Palestinian national team in the Asian Cup, and he was told, he received a call from his family in Gaza being told that 3 cousins were killed, and he still went on and performed, and they made history in the Asian Cup, going through the last round of 16. So we have to, it's a really good point that Nicola made, and thank you so much for your thoughts and your experience here. Right now, I want to give voice to somebody very important in campaigning too, Jill Thomson from Scottish Sports for Palestine. Jill has done an amazing work behind the spotlight, exposing the realities of Zionism in sports and showing just how deeply connected what's happening in Palestine is to the world of football and beyond. And please, Jill, cannot wait to hear you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you also for helping to organize today. So yeah, I want to talk today about the Red Card Israel movement, specifically in the context of media and politics, and also how it fits into the broader global kind of fan movement for Palestine. So firstly, I think it's important to understand that the Red Card Israel movement is a grassroots movement. So it doesn't belong to any one organization. It's part of the wider BDS movement. So it's firmly rooted in Palestinian resistance. So we're not here to brand a genocide. We're here to oppose it visibly and collectively. So the campaign owes itself to the efforts of the Palestine Football Association, who in 2008 began documenting how Israel was violating FIFA statutes through its occupation, its land theft, and also its apartheid policies. That evidence was presented to FIFA a few years later, and since then, momentum has only grown for the movement worldwide. So many people might recall powerful images taken in 2015 of Palestinian children red carding Israeli soldiers in the occupied West Bank. These images have been frequently recirculated in the media. So some of these actually feature freedom fighter Ahmed Tamimi and her brother Mohammed. Their family has endured immense violence and also imprisonment by the Israeli military. Their cousin was also killed. So these weren't just symbolic acts by Palestinian protesters, they were acts of resistance. And that's really at the heart of the campaign. Obviously, the campaign to ban Israel has been a really long one, and the Red Card Israel campaign was kind of reignited in 2023 by activists in South Africa in response to Israel's escalated genocide on Palestinians. And a few months later, in early 2024, I approached Celtic's Green Brigade with the idea to bring that campaign into stadiums and football grounds worldwide. And since then, thanks to the efforts of the organisers and also to the activists involved, and really importantly to the efforts of Palestinians who continue to resist the brutal consequences of Zionism and report on it, fans across the globe are now showing red cards at matches as standard. And I think this last point is a really important one about the efforts of Palestinians, because, I mean, we've just heard Nicola deliver a really powerful testimony of his experiences, and I think and the experiences of his players as well. And I'm sure many of us have heard sports journalists like Abubaker also do the same. So more than just a protest, this has become a necessary political intervention in global sport as a response to Palestinian suffering. But to get there, fans have had to overcome major political and cultural barriers. So many people will know pro-Palestinian expression has long been a taboo in football, something that's violently policed. This is largely because of Islamophobia and also because of Zionist influence within clubs, federations, and also within the media. So actually a major goal of this campaign was to normalize Palestinian support in football arenas, and that's something it has absolutely achieved. And you can see this in the way that it is generally positively received in the media as well. So concurrent to these red card displays, fans of football have also organized themselves to protest Israeli teams. Probably the most famous protest or well-known one was against Maccabi Tel Aviv in Amsterdam, But there really have been protests wherever Maccabi Tel Aviv play. There have also been boycotts. Another probably well-known boycott was France versus Israel Nations League match in 2024. So despite that being a high-profile League A fixture, it actually had the lowest ever turnout at the Stade de France in its history. So obviously this is massively embarrassing for the confederation involved, in this case UEFA, but also for the federations, France and Israel. And it's a big hit in their pocket as well. And fans have also taken action off the pitch. I think Kat kind of mentioned this, but in 2024, they sent around 7 million letters to the FIFA Council demanding Israel's expulsion. National federation heads were also CC'd into that letter. Petitions by DM25 and ECHO have gathered about, I think, 700,000 signatures from fans. And there's a third petition, which I can share in the chat, that was launched by Avaz, I think, just this month. And already it's gathered just short of 1 million signatures. So please do sign it to help them get over the line. And that's a clear message to get Israel chucked out of the World Cup. So yeah, I mean, I think the message from fans inside and outside the stadiums is really clear that football cannot continue to be used to sports wash genocide. I think that this campaign is a positive one in that it shows the power that fans hold. I mean, you simply can't have football without the fans. I think the clubs will try to downplay this, but they know it's true. So fans hold an immense power there. I think something that we have to do is we need to make a distinction between fans and boards. Celtic, I think, is a great example. Obviously, I do a lot of work on Scottish campaigning, so I speak from a Scottish perspective, but I think even internationally, Celtic as a club is often associated with Palestinian solidarity because of its fans. But internally, the board has consistently toed a Zionist line, while quite likely benefiting from the reputation built by its supporters. So it's really easy to conflate the two, but I think nobody loves this conflation more than the people that sit on the boards themselves. So I think we need to start recognizing that the actions of the fans are one thing, but we need to still call out the people on the boards. So this is why our job isn't done. We need to keep pressure on clubs, federations, and also governing bodies. We have to demand that they speak out and they refuse to let genocide be normalized in sport. And I would also echo what Nicola said, that I think that extends also to other genocides and other human rights abuses and also fights by Indigenous people around the world.
So will you say like the Zionist lobby is not just FIFA and UEFA, but it's also on a club level?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really, I think, something that's quite insidious. I think people would probably not believe the level as to which Zionism really has an iron grip on sport. I can only talk a little bit about the experience in Scottish sport. I would imagine that is a model which is repeated elsewhere in the world, because I think Zionists are quite well organized to that extent. But yeah, I mean, there are Zionists in probably every football club. They certainly have an influence on boards. They sit on football boards. They sponsor football clubs. They bail football clubs out when they get into financial difficulties. That's something that is not forgotten by football clubs. So yeah, they have immense power over the clubs.
Well, thank you so much, Jill, for your insight. But yeah, as we imagine, when we speak about the sports, especially football, there is a bigger picture, like Zionism lobbying is pretty much everywhere. I would like to turn now to Nathan Kalman-Lamb. Thank you so much for being today here. Nathan, who writes powerfully in the sports, politics, and inequality. He has also provided a bit of platform, which I was really honored to be interviewed in his podcast, where he has platform and Palestinian voices, which is super important, and so many other important perspectives in the sport through his podcast, like I said, The End of the Sport. So Nathan, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon and evening, everyone. I really appreciate having the honor and opportunity to speak with you here today. Also, I'm sorry that I was a little bit late. It was because I had some teaching responsibilities that I had to finish up. So I hope what I say is not a bit redundant with the first speakers. That's why I wanted to point that out. So I'm going to speak here generally about, Israel and sport, obviously, but in a general sense. The point I want to make is that everything I'm saying here in a broad sense applies to football specifically, even more so. I want to start by foregrounding how I come to this issue. First, as the descendant of Holocaust survivors, taught like so many of us with that particular history and otherwise, that genocide should never, under any circumstances, to any group of people anywhere, be allowed to happen again. And second, as someone whose professional work involves studying harm and exploitation in the context of sport. Now, the first precept brings me to the foundational premise for this entire conversation as I see it. Israel is and has, for almost an entire 2 years, and very possibly longer, been committing genocide in Gaza. I've said this since October 2023, but I note it has become both a scholarly and expert consensus shared by nearly every human rights organization in the world, including Israel's own, by the United Nations, and by the International Association of Genocide Scholars. And it is a fact shared with the world by Palestinians and Palestinian journalists who have given their lives to document it. I would also argue it is the relative consensus of most human beings across the world right now, with the notable exception of state and institutional leadership in the global north, and of course, capital. Any discussion of sport, in my opinion, must always return to that brutal fact. Sport matters, unquestionably, in the context of this genocide, and I'm going to say more about why I think it matters. But ultimately, the reason why it matters most is that it is an instrument, a tactic, a mechanism. Because sport matters to people everywhere, including Israel, it gives us leverage, and we have to use that leverage. But banning Israel from global sport is not, and must never be confused to be, an end of its own. It is a means to end this genocide, and we have to keep our eyes on that ball always. At the same time, it is unquestionably true that sport is part of the genocide. I'm privileged to be one of approximately 20 authors on an academic journal article forthcoming any day now in the Sociology of Sport journal, which is the leading journal in my field of study, the sociology of sport. That paper argues that Israel is committing what we call athleticide in Gaza. I think that understanding athleticide helps us grapple with exactly why it's important to contest Israel's genocide through sport. We argue in that paper that athleticide is a modality of cultural genocide, which in turn is part of the larger genocidal project to eradicate Palestine from existence. A project we should all be all too familiar with here in Canada, where I reside, for this too is a nation and state built on a genocidal colonial project against Indigenous people. Because sport is a vehicle through which populations find voice to express their identity to one another and on the global stage, it is also a target. This is why Israel has murdered more than 800 Palestinian athletes, more than half children, why they systematically attempt to maim through kneecapping, why they destroy athletic facilities and transform them into venues for horrific abuses, to ensure that Palestinians cannot express their national identity, which is to say their undeniable existence through sport. And as we've heard, that is not yet a successful effort, but that is the attempt. Yet the other side of this equation is that even as Israel attempts to eradicate Palestinian athletic identity, they also rely on sport to broadcast their own particular self-image to the world, and of course, to launder or sports wash it. Every time an Israeli athlete is invited to participate in international competition and wear their national colors on the global stage, the message is delivered anew that Israel belongs on that stage, that it deserves to be there, that it is a normal state like any other. This message is in fact further underlined precisely because, as we all know, Russia was almost instantly denied this privilege. The continued specter of Russia's censure and Israel's inclusion is a tacit form of genocide denialism, and indeed collaboration on the part of global institutions and individual countries. To close for now, let me be clear. As someone who has tried to fight to refuse that complicity when Canada was set to, and indeed did host Israel in Davis Cup tennis earlier this very month, every single one of us has a moral, yes, but also legal obligation to ban Israel from global sport. Every time we play them in competition, we are not, in fact, their opponents, but actually, we are their collaborators. Those games serve simultaneously both to scrub away at their sins, yes, but also to bathe us in blood. And that should feel unbearable to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nathan. You made some really good points there. Obviously, one of them, the amount of athletes that have been killed, the amount of footballers. Like, can we even think if that happened in any other country? Like, speaking from a journalist point of view, it will be like the stories that we have been hearing from Palestinian footballers. They will be all day on mainstream media, all day, like in every front page on any sports media. So again, I'm sorry to insist, but the silence from the sports media has been just deafening. I just remember a discussion that I had with the college. I'm going to have him college for not calling him anything else and be respectful, where he told me publicly on X that he couldn't find, as an European football journalist, the connection for him to speak about Palestinian footballers being killed in Gaza by Israel. So that really says a lot, unfortunately. And yeah, let's go with our next speaker. He really doesn't need any introduction. He's one of the most important, influential artists in the world. And for decades, if you think about an influencing culture who speaks about Palestine, obviously Roger Waters comes to your mind. So please, Roger, have your talk. Really happy to have you here.
I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much. I've been fascinated to listen to all the other speakers so far here today. I have no notes. I haven't written a speech. I will be speaking from my heart, off the cuff, on this, though it is a subject that has been interesting me for at least 10 years. I've been advocating for the banning of, well, you're going to speak now. I can tell you, keep opening your mouth.
Yeah, I was going to say that I remember that you were following the national team very closely through the World Cup qualifiers. I saw your videos every time they were due to play. You will post a video encouraging me. So it's really nice to see an influential voice like yours being interested in this super important issue. So please go on.
Okay, I will. But if you keep going like that, I'm gonna, because I'm such a gentleman, I will stop, and then you can whatever. But it's all right. I'll try and just keep going in spite of that. Where was I? Yeah, the Lions of Canaan. Go Palestine. They've been having very difficult times recently, and I'm sorry for that, you know. And my friend Lama Beirut, who's very involved with the Palestinian national team. In fact, I believe they're making a film about them, which I, to some extent, have supported financially as well. And I intend to continue to do so because it's an heroic story. Okay, I went to a meeting, speaking of Canada, which Nathan was just now, was it Toronto or Vancouver? It was in Vancouver. And I spoke in a church on the general subject of Palestine and the genocide that was already happening. It's been happening since 1948, but it was gathering steam at that point. This maybe was 5 or 10 years ago. And I'll never forget, I was talking to two lovely ladies. One of them was not Jewish Voice for Peace, but she was Independent Jewish Voices she was from. And the other one was a Muslim lady, and I can't remember the organization. So I had these two nice ladies, and they were, and I've seen a film of this since, and I remember it. I may drop the F-bomb in a minute, so tell all your audience to cover their ears. I think I was having a conversation with somebody called Nick Cave, who's an obscure Australian musician of some sort, but he's a Zionist. He believes in, you know, he refused to join BDS and blah, 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 blah. And I'm sure he has if he was, I shouldn't really speak about him because he's not here, but not being here is no reason not to speak about somebody who is supporting the genocide of my brothers and sisters in Palestine. Anyway, I make an outburst in this meeting. My eyes widen and I go, they're shooting the fucking feet of young footballers! Because that was after that particular moment that somebody else mentioned here on this panel, when two young Palestinian footballers were walking home from the remains of the national stadium, and the IDF targeted their feet. They shot one of them 11 times in one foot, and the other one was only shot a couple of times. But when a doctor reporting on it later said, not only will they never kick a football again, these two young men, they'll never walk again properly. And so when you go back to something like that, what am I thinking of? My mind immediately goes to two things. One is the Vuelta in Spain, which just happened, which was another sporting occasion, right? It's a bicycle race. It's like the Tour de France, but it's a Spanish version of it. Our brothers and sisters in the resistance movement in Spain stopped it dead. This brings me back to Celtic, or, you know, which Jill, was it Jill? Yeah, which Jill was talking about. Okay. I've been following the Celtic supporters and their resistance to the genocide and to the occupation of Palestine as well for a number of years, and trying to support them whatever way I can. We need direct action. We cannot just spend our time to sign. I love the idea of petition, 1 million names on a petition, brilliant. But as we know, it is an uphill battle to persuade the Infantino, or whatever his name is, to change the policy of FIFA and to ban Israel from international football, which they have to do, and which they will. I have no doubt that you and people like you will achieve this end. And the petitions are a really good thing, but so is direct action. I have been told that if I go back to England, I'm in the United States at the moment. If I go back to England, like George Galloway, who was supposed to be on this panel but isn't, I will almost certainly be arrested at the airport. Why? Because I hope you're paying attention, MI6. I support Palestine action. They are not a terrorist organization. They've never hurt a single hair on anybody's head. What they have done is driven Elbit systems out of the UK, and more power to them. And we need more of that kind of direct, not violence. I'm not talking about violence, though you could imagine, I tell you what, if I'd been a youth in Amsterdam when those awful Israeli football supporters were there, charging around the town, beating people up, I might have got a bit violent myself under those circumstances. But no, direct action. So yeah, let's stop the Tour of France whenever that comes. It's in another month. And I think the French will. I think they will stand in the street and go, no, if there's an Israeli team riding in the Tour de France, we will stop the Tour de France. And they'd be right to. Okay, this is exactly the right thing. So I'm very in favor of direct action, so long as it's non-violent. I can ramble on for as long as you want. What else was I going to pick up? Something
I was going to say,
yeah.
a very interesting topic that you brought up, and it's La Vuelta cycling tour. That since the La Vuelta got boycotted by the Spanish people, who kept following throughout all the stages of La Vuelta and interrupting it to the very end, the cycling team, the Israelis, are getting banned in every single tour that they get to have a participation. So BDS and this direct action, like you said, are being victorious in this one, and we have pretty much broken the Israeli cycling system. So this is wonderful, wonderful news. And
bravo
for bringing it up. And this is exactly the energy that we need in every single sport, in every cultural event. like you said, just like we saw so many artists boycotting these festivals all around the summer, where KKR were involved, and then companies, who are involved in Zionism and has ties to Israel. So thank you very much, Roger, for this talk. It was lovely to.
That, of course, is response to the organizations like Glastonbury who support the Zionist cause. Those arseholes, that awful family who own Glastonbury, they've been supporting the occupation of Palestine for all these years. They banned me from Glastonbury because I'm an activist and I make no bones about it. I have been since 2006. It took me that long to wake up. I actually did a gig in 2006 at Neve Shalom, also known as Wat Asalam, which is a peace village on the road halfway between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. But that's another story. It's a long story. But since my eyes were opened by my friend Allegra Pacheco, there's a story I always tell where we're driving through the West Bank, because I went back the next year to see what was really going on. And I went, oh, it's a nice road. And she went, yeah, brand new, spanking new Tom McAdam Road going through the country. She said, yeah, it's very nice. It's for Jews only. What? Don't be silly. I mean, I just didn't believe her. I thought she was lying to me. She said, no, this is only for Jewish settlers. If you're local, if you're an Arab, if you're Palestinian, you're not allowed to drive on this road. And then it was like somebody going, you know, wake up. Do not, how would it feel? Imagine if you live in New York and you go drive across the Hudson River and to try and go on the, whatever that is, I-95 that goes south, the New Jersey Turnpike. And they stop you at the booth and go, sorry, you're not a Christian. You can't go on this road. What? And yet, 1948, December the 10th, we all signed up to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We all agreed that there are certain right to life and liberty and food and shelter and all those very, very simple things, but mainly life, the right to life. And we see it being denied to our brothers and sisters. They're murdering them all. They're doing it systematically, and they're doing it with no sense of wrong, or they're doing it with no conscience. So as I say often when I'm involved in situations like this, talking to other activists who are my brothers and sisters, we are involved in an existential battle for the soul of the human race. That's what this is. We are demanding that our brothers and sisters all over the world follow a moral compass. And part of the following of that moral compass is to abide by international law. I know I'm telling you things that you already know and that we all know, but everybody knows these things. And yet, Infantino and the FIFA don't abide by international law. They don't, because they are puppets. They're puppets of the settler colonial regime, the Zionist entity, not to mention the settler colonialist regime in the United States and in the UK and in France and in Italy, and not so much in Spain now. Thank you, people of Spain. And not so much in Scotland and Chile. Thank you, thank you, Celtic supporters, for standing up for what's right. This is why it's possible for us to get up in the morning. I know everybody on this panel probably does the same thing I do. You wake up in the morning, you wipe away the tears, and then you say, what can I do today? And then you go and bloody well do it. And we are making progress, are we not? I know we are. And we're reaching all kinds of tipping points. So we desperately need every one of our brothers and sisters all over the world to never unload a ship from Israel, to never allow them to cycle or fence or play football or do anything with the rest of us until such time as they are prepared to renounce their racist, religious supremacist, Ubermensch ideology and come back to join the rest of the human race in a world where we accept that We don't get our permission from God to do whatever the F we like with anybody else because we're the Übermenschen. No, you don't. This is absolute nonsense and everybody knows it. You know, and so of course we're hugely critical and we will stop you. Anyway, I love the idea of people in hotels or bus drivers go, oh, it's the Israeli, I'm not going to clean your room. I am not going to drive your bus. No, I'm not. And we don't have to spit on them. I mean, personally, I would. But you don't. You can be non-violent with them, but you must not serve them tea. This is absolutely against everything that any of us believe in. So, what else have I got to say? I feel, you know, I feel an almost overwhelming urge coming over me now to have a word with my ex-guitar player's wife. I've never spoken about this, but a couple of years ago, she accused me, and these are the words, in a Twitter message. She said, Roger Waters is an anti-Semite to the bottom of his rotten core. And then my ex-guitar player, her husband, tweeted, absolutely true, every word. So I want them to sit with that for a bit now, those pricks, him and his wife. They are supporting the genocide. By accusing me of anti-Semitism, they become part of what Nathan was talking about. It's support for the genocide of a whole people by association, simply by attacking me for trying to defend the moral compass of the whole human race against the onslaught of people who, like them, stand by silent and indifferent. You know, I wrote a song years ago again. It's called Each Small Candle. I'm going to finish this a bit. And the first verse of it, which I'm going to tell you if I can remember, was written by an Italian poet, and I've no idea who he or she was. I've never discovered the identity. So whoever you are, if you recognize these lyrics, I owe you a lot of publishing royalty on it. And I've always said, if I ever find out, this was the lines that not the torturer will scare me, nor the body's final fall, nor the barrels of death's rifles, nor the shadows on the wall, nor the night when to the ground the last dim star of pain is hurled, but the blind indifference of a merciless, uncaring world. And that hit me like a spear going through my heart when I read those words. And it's the first verse of a song that I wrote, which goes, but the song is called Each Small Candle. And my answer to his beautiful poem, that tragic and desperately upset, is that we each have the ability to be one small candle, and that we can create a light all together that will light all the dark places. And eventually we will bring love and truth to this planet home. So I thank you for having me as part of your thing today. And I look forward to seeing, and while we're on it, somebody mentioned my mate Dave Zirin. Is that how you pronounce his name? One of you did, anyway. He's a sports writer in North America. I met him when I went and spoke at Amherst many years ago at the invitation of Sut Jahali, and we went on to make a film called The Occupation of the American Mind, which I narrated. But I was there with Linda Sasa and Mark Lamont Hill and Dave, and so I met him there. And I'm happy to say whenever I do a gig anywhere in North America, he comes with his friends, and we have a few drinks after the show. But this is such a great band of brothers and sisters. This band, us, those of us who have empathy and empathize with our brothers and sisters in Palestine and are not afraid to speak up. In fact, bring them on. I'm proud to be part of this team today.
Roger, what will be your message to the footballers who haven't said anything about the ongoing genocide? Just to finish.
To the footballers,
to the footballers who stayed silent all this time?
Mo? All right, let's pick out Mo Salah. I've no idea what Mo Salah's politics are. We used to have one at Arsenal, which is the football team I support, El Neni, and he was not silent. He stood up to be counted. I think they fired him because he did, but I don't know. I could be wrong about that. But just, hey, brother, you have to, this is one point. You have to, the pendulum is swinging, okay? We are at the tipping point. We need you to step forward and tip us all over the edge. We need Mo Salah and about 20 other, Messi almost did it. Somebody spoke about the fact that the friendly against Israel was cancelled, Argentina, but they never quite came out and went, no, not a mass. No, we won't. Yeah, footballers need to step up to, and it won't be all of them. Just like it's not everybody in every rock and roll band, Dave. So it won't be everybody who steps up and does the right thing. But we need a few of them. And it's difficult for them because they're very well paid and their jobs are on the line. Because you're right. Imagine if you were a Spurs player and you did that. David Levy would have you out of that team and on your bike before you could say no. And you'd be cut off without a penny. Actually, I don't think he's in charge of Spurs anymore. So I don't know who the new
Not anymore. He's not anymore, but we know what you mean.
Yeah, and I don't care. But I'm, my heart and soul is with my brothers and sisters at Celtic, and I hope there are some at Arsenal, which is my club that I support. Because like all Englishmen, I have an allegiance to a football club, and I have had for like 50 or 60 years. So it's very, very important, and I've been saying this for years and years and years and years. We have this and Eurovision. How could you let them be in Eurovision? Didn't they host it? I think they actually hosted it this year, and some people went and took part in it. It's disgusting that they would allow that. But our message is getting through. Do you think I'm coming across as being loving and truthful? Because I do.
We have to be. We actually have to be. And as an Arsenal fan myself, I hope the culture club, as we call it, they step up and do something because it's long overdue. And long overdue, we show Israel and Israeli clubs the red card. Thank you so much, Roger, for your voice. We're going to continue moving because we have some amazing speakers to still participate. Now we will hear from Robert Wilson, who has been deeply involved in the global solidarity campaigns for Palestine. Robert, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I just want to, first of all, I'm suffering under the burden of having to follow Roger because he's an idol of mine. But having said that, I think one of the things that we've largely ignored in a sense is the fact that the World Cup, as it's potentially scheduled now, is coming to the United States, Mexico, and Canada. And based on what the newspapers and media say today, it looks as if it's possible that UEFA may take the first move in at least potentially banning Israel. However, even if that happens, there is still the event itself in the United States. And even though I don't believe that the quote unquote pressure we're bringing to bear on this event will be enough to bar the United States, I do believe that if Israel is banned, it will put immense pressure on the Trump administration to do something. Now, what we can't read the tea leaves. Having said that, I want to release, I think, some information that may not be well known. All of you know the global game that we call the beautiful game, but there is some important history about the beautiful game that is largely forgotten. And that history has to do with the British Empire and how the British Empire used sports as a tool to mollify the respective colonial populations that they eventually dominated. If you look at the globe today, the three sports that they used were rugby, football, and cricket. And interestingly enough, rugby became the sport that went to the nations where there was, quote unquote, a white population agenda afoot. In other words, Canada, the United States, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand became white dominant populations. And interestingly enough, that's where rugby took hold in terms of a centerpiece of authority as to how these countries would be run. And needless to say, rugby was the sport of the Oxford-Cambridge crowd. Football, on the other hand, was a sport of the masses. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because in the United States today, we have, you know, for lack of a better way to describe it, a colonial aspect with respect to how sports is managed in that country. And I wrote a book about this called The Football Manifesto. And the conclusion that the book reaches, which is something I think that most people forget about, is that football in the United States is largely controlled by the NFL. The NFL is the puppet master of the sport in the United States. It's not well known, but the two organizations that are principally responsible for the sport, Major League Soccer and US Soccer, which is FIFA's representative in that country, are basically controlled by the NFL for all practical purposes. It's not a surprise, and it shouldn't be a surprise, but in 2026, assuming the games go ahead, all of the stadia for World Cup 26 in the United States are NFL stadia. That's not an accident. And so I'm saying this to say that there are layers to history that we're somehow missing. If we do deep research in kind of the classic historical materialism sense, we come up and unearth things that are, you know, at least helpful in terms of understanding how the world came to be the way it is today. Having said that, my hope in speaking to you today is to also create a plan and kind of a tactic or strategy of action so that post-World Cup 2026, there is something left in the imperial core of the United States that resurrects the heart and soul of what football is all about, because football has traditionally been a grassroots sport for people at the bottom of the pyramid. And that is exactly what it should be and hopefully will be in the United States post-World Cup 2026. So I'd like to potentially enlist your support and have discussions about that. I appreciate, obviously, everybody's contributions here. But I'd also like to encourage people to help a movement in the United States to recapture this sport and bring it back down to the grassroots and have this sport be, in some sense, a tool of protest and solidarity with oppressed peoples around the world. And in order to do that, we have a website up called urbanrefugee.com. You can visit what we're doing. There's a GoFundMe there, and we'd like to try to get literally global support so that we can reorient this game to be a message and an empowerment tool for people at the grassroots in the United States who support this sport and right now don't have a voice.
Thank you so much, Robert. You made a really good point there about how us as fans have lost some kind of power in football. It came to my mind right now that just a few months ago, it was, I think, a German team tried to sign the Israeli player Sean Weissman, and fans as soon as they knew he was going to be signed by the club, I think it was Fortuna Düsseldorf, exactly. Well, they were totally against it. They on social media they flooded all the team's social media asking for this player not to be signed. So yeah, I think it's very important that we encourage sports fans, football fans, to gain that power back, because I think institutions and sporting bodies have long tried to make it look like we don't have a say, we don't have any power left. But is it true? There is no sports without the fans and the athletes. We still have that power. We only need to claim it back.
I like to add a couple of things. One, in the United States today, the professional sports scene, and obviously all of you know how powerful that machine is in the United States. there are 5 professional sports leagues: baseball, basketball, hockey, basketball, and American football. Those 5 leagues represent 154 teams, all of which are owned by billionaires, all of them. And probably you don't know this, but 2 weeks ago, when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, literally the next day, and for roughly the next 10 days, the NFL promoted the idea of celebrating Charlie Kirk's life at their games in the United States. Now, not all the teams did it, but a good number of the teams did do it. Having said that, and you mentioned Dave Zirin. Dave Zirin has an incredible movie about the NFL called Behind the Shield, which is available on basically YouTube. You can get it for free. But it really captures what the NFL is. I mean, the NFL really is a tool of the military-industrial complex and the settler colonial program. That's what that league does. And lamentably, that league is in some sense guiding much of what is going on with respect to the World Cup this coming year behind the scenes. No one knows this, but that's really the driver of the World Cup in the United States. So I think as long as we ignore the backdrop and background that is really driving the engine of what's happening with football in the United States, we missed the boat. And I, just for, continuation of the concepts here, the American quote unquote NFL, I call American rugby. I refuse to call it football because they have quite literally stolen the nomenclature in the context of promoting their own brand. So football, as far as I'm concerned, is a sport of the people. And obviously, American rugby, lamentably, is a sport that reinforces the entire imperialist colonial ethos that this country represents.
Thank you so much, Robert, for joining us and for your perspective. I know we are a bit tight with the timing, but I will try to do my best. Now to follow, US activist Ajamu Baraka will share his perspective. He's an editor and contributing to the columnist for the Black Agenda Report. He's the director of the North-South Project People's Center Human Rights and serves on the executive committee of the US Peace Council and leadership body of the US-based United National Anti-War Coalition. Ajamu, please.
Well, thank you so much, Leyla, and thank everyone for sticking in for this very, very important conversation. It's a pleasure and an honor to be a part of this process. As one of the organizations that helped initiate this process of attempting to organize an awareness that the issue of Israeli normalization of the genocide has to be confronted. And the one way in which it's confronted is by naming what we are in fact looking at. And what we are looking at, my friends, and it's quite clear from everyone's presentations, that Israeli occupation, the Israeli state, is organized fascism. We say that quite clearly because we know that colonialism is organized fascism, and that's exactly what we have in terms of how we characterize and the historical reality of the colonial state. Now, we understand that it's quite clear that we have a multi-front struggle here. The issue of sport is very similar to the kinds of ways in which we isolated the South African apartheid regime and helping to delegitimize that regime. And the objective, of course, wasn't just to put a break on the oppressive characteristics of that regime, but to bring about its elimination, to bring about the realization of African self-determination in that country. And so that's important as we think about this issue of sport, that we recenter the politics that we are in fact involved in. What we are involved here is that this is one aspect, one front of a multi-front struggle that is absolutely important for people to understand, that this struggle goes beyond just eliminating Israel from the World Cup, but it is a weapon, a tool that must be utilized to continue the pressure on our various states and on the US specifically, and of course on the apartheid regime to dismantle this horrific regime and to provide the conditions for the realization of Palestinian self-determination. That has to be front and center. It has to be absolutely clear, because as I think Robert said earlier, even if there is the elimination of Israel from the World Cup, the question becomes, what about the United States, for example? Now, one of the things that we have done in the Black Alliance of Peace is that we have, of course, centered the issue of delegitimizing Israel and the genocide that it is involved in. But we also want people to understand and to recognize that the other issue that has to be raised is the issue of the United States of America. FIFA has a responsibility to provide safety and security to the fans and to the teams. Now, what we have in the US is in fact a consolidating fascism, a fascism that has a detrimental impact on everyone in the country who happens to be non-European or non-white. The recent decision by the Supreme Court has in essence made it legal to engage in racial profiling. We know that a number of states have issued travel advisories against traveling to the US. We know that individuals have been harassed in the United States, even individuals in transit to other places. And we are saying quite simply that the US is an unsafe place to host these games. The other issue, though, is this. There could be no genocide, no occupation in Palestine without the United States of America. The United States of America is complicit in the genocide, and therefore there has to be accountability. If we kick out Israel, but yet the US is allowed to host the World Cup, isn't that also a form of normalizing the genocide? How can the United States of America that facilitated this process be allowed to host this as though nothing happened? Not only the World Cup, but also the Olympics in 2028. So if we understand and remind ourselves of the longer term aspects of this struggle, then we have to combine both our outrage and opposition to Israel along with that of the United States of America. So no matter what decision may be ultimately made about Israeli participation, we've got to keep the pressure on the US. We've got to keep the pressure on the Israeli state itself. We got to remind ourselves, as Roger said earlier, that we can't really depend on just pressure coming from states. That the way we defeat the Israeli state, the way we defeat the US settler colonial state is as a consequence of a bottom-up process from the people, a popular struggle, centering people-centered human rights and centering a unwavering commitment to transforming this reality. So my friends, I'm not going to stay too long with this. We have a lot of people who are speaking, but we just wanted to remind people that the struggle is a struggle that is internal. that we're going to continue to wage the struggle until we are in a place where the major existential threat for collective humanity, the United States of America and Israel, that threat has been contained. And that's not going to happen just as a consequence of sloganeering. We're not going to be able to stop them just by being outraged, but it will be stopped only through the collective activity of the masses of the people globally. So my friends, that's the challenge, that's the task, and that indeed is our responsibility.
Bravo.
Thank you so much for your views, Ajamu, and you made a really good point about the US being complicit in genocide, of course. How are we supposed to have a World Cup celebrated or just awarding a World Cup to a country that is currently, directly committing genocide? Is it going to be safe for its fans when we know we are going to have ISIS surrounding the stadiums and just harassing the fans? At the same time, we have to think, we have Iran taking part in the World Cup. I'm pretty sure that the players won't have a problem getting the visas because I'm sure FIFA will do something to ensure it. But will the fans, the Iranian fans, be able to travel safely to the US? Even if, let's put the image, if Palestine made it to the World Cup, what will happen? Will the Palestinian flags be present inside the stadium? Will they allow it? So these are very important points. And also, not to forget that following Russia's ban after its invasion of Ukraine, Belarus are still playing behind closed doors their qualifiers and in neutral venues. So we still see Belarus being punished for being, let's say, an ally to Russia, but we see the US being awarded with a World Cup. So it's a really good point that you made there. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now I would like to give its turn to Bram Hanekom from Africa for Palestine, representing continental movement across Africa. And you have led the calls to isolate Israel in sport. So please, Bram.
No, thank you so much, Leyla, and thanks to everyone, Robert, Roger, everyone, Jill. We in South Africa are evidence that Red Card Israel would work. Apartheid South Africa was successfully put onto its knees through global solidarity and actions. Roger, when I was young, we were quite proud. I was born in exile in Zimbabwe, and we were quite proud to listen to Another Brick in the Wall because we knew it had been banned in South Africa. Because, of course, another brick in the wall fitted very well in our anti-apartheid movement, particularly with the education being forced into being Afrikaans during Bantu education. Robert, you'd be very happy to know that a current Springbok player and somebody who's captained the Springboks and is currently one of our best players, his name is Salman Morat, actually did a public statement in support of Palestine shortly after October 7th. And so there are some elements in South Africa of transformation and people speaking out. I personally think that it's incredible for people who are in positions of influence to be taking the risk, particularly in environments like in rugby, which remains largely untransformed. And I can confidently say that rugby is a sport that all the white South Africans who may be serving in the IDF would be watching. So it really hits the heart of sport. And I think that when Salman Morat did that statement, we had some engagement with him. And he actually said, even if I lose it all, in the end, I'm going to ask myself, would I regret doing it or would I regret not doing it? And he proceeded to do so, which I thought was extremely bold. And we have at least a couple of Springbok rugby players we can be proud of watching, even though there's a lot of need for transformation. I think that the point made about America and Canada as well is very, very important. These are, of course, the backbone of the Israeli genocidal regime, and we can't ignore that while we're focusing on the Israeli regime. I want to point out that it was actually in 1957 that table tennis led the charge in banning the apartheid regime from its global sport participation. And this eventually led to the 1970s, where cricket, rugby, and all other major sports were also banning apartheid South Africa. And I can say, as a white South African, that it really did quite successfully show the white South African population that they're not in a normal society. The fact that you had some of the best athletes in the world, some of the best runners in the world, breaking world records, but being unable to compete in international tournaments and in the Olympics, really made it very difficult for the apartheid regime to even hide from themselves that that they were that abnormal and that they were the skunk of the world. So it was quite significant in its impact on the apartheid regime. I think that our struggle in South Africa was different, very different. We never actually had a situation where bombs were dropped on our township from the skies. We had an apartheid, and for many years, I think most of us here campaigned very hard for Israel to be correctly labeled an apartheid state. But the events overtook us, and now it's a genocidal state. It's actually way, way worse than we had ever experienced in apartheid South Africa. And this is something that Frank Chikane said at the march we arranged on Saturday in Cape Town. And it's really a reality we need to confront, that the Israeli regime is far, far more brutal and nasty than we could have possibly imagined it would be. And I think it's important to identify that, because the walls are crumbling. People are increasingly speaking out. The global nations of the world are beginning to turn the tide. But unfortunately, we have this very strange situation where during the anti-apartheid struggle, we never needed to preamble our slogans with "I'm not racist, but apartheid must fall. I'm not racist, but these racial policies must fall." This anti-Semite label that tries to turn our solidarity in some kind of apologetic cause that we need to preamble each time. I think finally we need to kill that once and for all. There's nothing anti-Semitic whatsoever about standing for Palestinian solidarity. There's nothing at all anti-Jewish. In fact, we'd be helping the Jewish peoples of the world if we could encourage them to lead the charge against this genocide that's happening in Palestine and Gaza right now. So in closing, I want to thank everybody here. For us in South Africa, the words of Roger, we've seen you on social media. We've been very proudly sharing your videos in our WhatsApp groups. It's really helped us add energy to the struggle. In South Africa, not long ago, we had a soccer match between Bafana Bafana and Malawi. Leyla spoke to some of the detained activists who were arrested in that protest, and she actually spoke to them while they were in their jail cells. So there is a really strong way in which all of you have played and continue to play a role in inspiring others and inspiring each other. So I'm really grateful to be here, and I thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bram, for joining us today. I think we are done with all the speakers, and we will move to answer some. Well, first of all, I would like between the speakers to have a bit of a chat, to ask some questions that you want to direct to other speakers. Who can start with? Jill, is there anything you would like to ask to any of our speakers today? You are mute.
Sorry, I'm unmuted now. Yeah, I had two questions. So the first one, maybe this should go to Shireen and Nathan. I don't know if you both want to take it or if one of you wants to take it, but Scotland actually shares a commitment to boycotting apartheid in sport through something called the Gleneagles Agreement, which is actually a Commonwealth instrument. So I can totally understand the argument that it's a kind of colonial instrument, but it could be useful to the extent that it's a commitment to boycott any country where sport is organized by race, religion, etc. Do you think that there's any political will in Canada to uphold these commitments?
Thanks, Jill. And that's a really interesting. The Gleneagles Agreement is something that's rarely mentioned. I think one of the things too, it's because it's complicated because it's a colonial tool as well and was established through that. So while I say it could be a benefit to implore, I do see it stemming and there being adequate critique of it. In fact, there was a letter sent to just the other day, and the coverage was in the CBC, that was put into the chat of a letter being sent to Canada Soccer Association on actually doing that same thing, and in terms of the critique of the Israeli regime participating. And as someone who's covered the Soccer Association very closely for the very long time, I think the ability to, and I've watched how not only federations, but teams contort themselves to avoid the subject, saying they'll follow the measure of FIFA. And this, the same thing happened when I did my reporting about the Davis Cup. When I wrote to Tennis Canada, they said that they follow the ITF. So whatever it is, it's this means to move and pass the buck, so to speak, that they don't want to deal with it. So whether we implore Gleneagles, whether we implore human rights agreement, I mean, quite frankly, every single agreement or principle of humanity, as Nathan said, has been egregiously destroyed. So I think to implore any type of policy or any type of, you're just not appealing to people's humanity. This is all about this capitalist cog at this point. And it's really, and someone asked about this. I think Leyla, you asked why. It's the devaluing of brown bodies. This is simply a lack of valuing Palestinian lives. There's nothing else, because if we literally look at the remark and the reaction about Ukraine, deservedly in terms of supporting them, why wasn't that offered here? Why is that never offered here? We haven't even begun to talk about Congo and Sudan. So like, this issue is literally absolutely embedded into it. So I would like to say that Canada has a sentiment, but Canadians hide behind this false modesty and politeness that is going to translate, history will show, it's complicit in this. And I think Nathan said something to the effect of, you know, we are bathed in blood, and I'll quote him on that, because now it's a matter of changing the narrative to where you are complicit if you don't resist against it.
Kat, I know you have, oh, sorry, Kat, I know you have your hand up. I want to hear what you have to say. Can I just really quickly, a couple comments on this? Thanks for that, Shireen. I just want to highlight with the Davis Cup experience, what became clear to me, right, is that the event occurred in one of the least populous regions of the country, probably not coincidentally. It was in Halifax in the Maritimes, which is where I'm not in Halifax, but I'm in the Maritimes. And there was so much popular resistance and organizing that Tennis Canada ultimately chose not to allow spectators to attend. So I think that actually there is an enormous popular will in Canada to hold Israel accountable. At the same time, we can see that despite this a very significant popular campaign, authorities sided with playing the match and hosting Israel. And it's clear the CEO of Tennis Canada has ties to Israel personally. This is the problem. The class that controls the state and other institutions in Canada continues to feel allegiance to Israel. And as former UN Special Rapporteur Michael Link has told me, one reason for this is that were Canada to acknowledge genocide and apartheid, it would activate legal obligations to intervene, and it would mean that senior Canadian officials who have been collaborators, worse than just complicity, full-on collaborators for 2 years, would potentially be held legally accountable for their crimes. Of course, they don't want that to happen.
Thank you so much for your replies. Anybody else that would like to ask another speaker a question? Kat, please.
Yeah, I wanted to tie into what Jill was saying about the agreement. There is something in the and this is to you, Roger, because you said you are meeting Gustavo Petro, from President of Colombia. There is something called the United Nations International Convention Against Apartheid for sport, in sport. Now, under this convention, the parties, such as Colombia, are actually obliged to, in international law, they have obligation to prohibit sporting contact to their athletes and teams against Israeli athletes and teams when they're representing their country. So in that sense, if he's your friend, do relay the message. It's not too well-known convention, and they can take a simple measure and work in consortium with the Hague Group countries to come out, several of them, not just Colombia, and simply, prohibit their teams and athletes from playing, which is outright, nothing to do with sport, simply implementing their international obligations. And FIFA would have a hard time saying that that is something that they object to, implementation of such convention, you know, and their obligations. So it's a very, very useful tool, I think, that countries could use, no matter, I mean, about the origins and whether they're colonial or not. This is a tool we can use right now, legal tool.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that, obviously, but the fact of the matter is that the obligations that the countries have are based upon the idea that there is a system of international law. And as we know, the United States of America and Israel don't give a fig for international law. Everything that they do contravenes all international law. And so the niceties of holding people to their obligations, every state in the world has an absolute obligation to prevent genocide. It's part of the UN Charter. So we know all that, and that's why it's so important that Gustavo Petro gives us his resolution quite soon, and we get it into the right channels so that it is actually heard as in an emergency session of the General Assembly at the United Nations within the next few days, not in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks or a month. It'll be too late. This could so easily be submerged into, the bric-a-brac of business, and we can't deal with that now. Yeah, we have to deal with it now. So I take your point, and yeah, of course they have a responsibility. Yeah, all states all over the world under the UN Charter have an absolute responsibility to agree with everything that we've all said here today, but they won't, and they don't. That is why, the speakers who were saying, I was only one of them, saying we have to appeal to us, to the great unwashed, to stand up and be counted and to direct action, stop the Tour de France, stop them playing, make it impossible for them to visit and play football or any other sport with us until such time as they subscribe to international law. But, it might be that we would have to wait for the United States to sign up to the Treaty of Rome, which they've failed to do since its signing, whenever it was. And so they're not interested actually in the rule of law, but we are. And we just hope that football supporters all over the world are too, that they want there to be a system of international law based upon universal human rights. So I'm repeating myself, but I agree with you.
What you're saying, Roger, is absolutely important for people to really come to terms with. The fact of the matter that we are in a period of absolute lawlessness.
Yeah.
And that period was sort of symbolically represented by Gaza. That with the normalization of genocide and with the complete paralysis from the United Nations Security Council and with the consensus support coming from the most powerful nations on the planet, it's indicated that basically everything that we thought of as international human rights and international law was a fiction, that it boiled down to might makes right.
Yep.
And so it depends then on us, the masses of the people globally. And that may sound like a cliche to some people, but when you've been involved in international struggle, when you're seeing the consequences of what the people can do, then it's more than just a cliche. This is a fight for democracy, a fight for people-centered human rights. And it can only be won by the people themselves. So while we will use these international mechanisms, we're not going to put all of our hope and faith in them, because we are in a completely different era right now.
You're absolutely right. The only good thing that's happened in all of this is that the mask is now off, because in 1776, In the Declaration of Independence, we believe all men are created equal and certain inalienable rights. It was bullshit. They never believed that for a single second. And they've shown by their actions since 1776 that they couldn't care less about. That's theater. That's Hollywood. But it's nothing to do with the reality of how they behave as settler colonialists. They murdered all the indigenous people in North America and South America and Australasia and, you know, all over and Africa and whatever. And you can tell by the way the vassal states in Europe are still clinging to the coattails of the evil empire that is the United States of America. You can tell that they still have that weird, I call it primal disdain. You know, it's the destiny thing. It's what the Pilgrim Fathers thought. This is our Zion, they thought. It's just the same story being played out again, but it's being played out in front of our eyes in Palestine. And it's so obvious and clear and undeniable that it gives up. We, the people, now have an opportunity to go, do you think we're stupid? We are not, Mr. Infantino, we are not infants like you. We see this bullshit going down and we will fight you. We will fight you. We'll fight you at the football grounds if necessary, because we are human beings and we need to organize our race, Homo sapiens. We're all brothers and sisters. There are no other races. We all know that. We're all of African descent. We may look a bit different, some of us, but that's irrelevant. We're all Homo sapiens. We're all cousins. We're all one family and we have to behave like it. I know you know this, so.
I'm going to borrow a few minutes of you because we have a last speaker that couldn't make it earlier. And it's, for me, it's super important to give him voice today. He's a young Palestinian journalist who managed to evacuate from Gaza. So he's pretty much a genocide survivor. Abubaker used to be a football reporter, but saw himself being just 22 years old, having to turn into a war reporter while his family and his people were undergoing genocide. Please, Abubaker, I'm so happy to finally have you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's lovely to be here with you all.
But Abubaker, I would like you to give us the insight of what's been to be like to be in Gaza, the suffering of your people, and of course, a bit of your perspective from the football side, all the stories that you have heard from footballers, from athletes in general, from the stadiums destroyed. I mean, and yeah, I remember a reporting that you did recently on the destruction of the football academies.
Yeah. I mean, what's good to know, well, which is not good, of course, I think there are no words to describe the sporting tragedy in Gaza at the moment. You're looking at the sports scene, which is, well, utterly decimated. The only, which is something really important to give you an insight about, the only sports or football facilities that are standing are just 4 sports facilities, which are 3 clubs in central Gaza. That includes Ittihad Deir al-Balah, Khadamat Deir al-Balah, which are in Deir al-Balah, and it is the least devastated city in the Gaza Strip, and indeed the capital of the Gaza Strip right now. And also there is a club in Al Nusayrat camp. So these are the only 3 clubs that are still standing in one stadium out of 10 stadiums, which is Al Dura Stadium. And I remember visiting Al Dura Stadium and seeing recent images from there. And when I look at the stadium, the pitch has completely been used as a shelter. The stadium is now a shelter for thousands of displaced Palestinians from the north of the Strip. So it needs time to even repair it. It needs a lot of time to even repair it. And I do vividly remember going to stadiums in Khan Yunis and Gaza City and a variety of football facilities, and they have all been left in ruins by the Israeli military. There have been deliberate strikes to destroy this scene. And what is important about these sports or football facilities that, you know, they are lying, or they lie in the middle, in the heart of the cities in the Gaza Strip, in the middle of the refugee camps. So when you look at what Israel has done to this football scene and the number of players it has killed, I know my neighbor, he was a very promising right wing. He was murdered by Israel in one of the attacks in July 2024, yes, in July. And then I saw the scene at that time. His brain got out of his head after the attack. So this young man, and I remember talking to him all the time. He's my neighbor. He was my neighbor, and he was always talking about his dream to become like a really good right wing, like Saka, like these players, because he's been always watching them. And this is just only one story. I do remember interviewing and talking to Mohammed Barakat for many times, and he told me like I was improving into becoming a really good footballer, and he was having chances before the genocide to play in Jordan and in different clubs outside Gaza City. But at the same time, the story doesn't start from the genocide. No, it goes beyond that, because Mohammed and other players whom I've met, I think, some of the other players like Mohammed Barakat, like Khalid Abed, Ezra and all these players, they recounted to me the many times they were given chances to, for example, to go for a training, for an internship, for something outside to play, or to pursue their careers, but then they were denied exit by the Israeli military outside Gaza. So Gaza was and is still a concentration camp where players' dreams were simply crushed. And I remember doing a story that was a year ago, and that was a part of, that was not only one story, but it was multiple stories writing about that. Well, Gazan players dream to pursue their careers outside. And I do remember that the story got quite some attention. However, no one cared about them. No one literally cared about them. But simultaneously, what you will see is that reporters at Sky News, reporters at the BBC, reporters at those complicit Western media outlets reporting on one of the players. I remember one of the stories about that Rob Harris, Sky News correspondent, did. It was about that this Jewish player with Birmingham City felt unsafe because of the rise of Palestinian support towards Palestine. And then at that time, there were more than 100 players killed in Gaza. He never cared a whit about them. He completely didn't give a jot about it. But then, he just went for another story. So what should we talk about if Israel is not going to be expelled from FIFA and UEFA? And we're talking about, as you said, Leyla, many times, the question shouldn't be why or when Israel should be expelled, but it should be why Israel hasn't been expelled for a very, very long time. Not only since October the 7th, that was before that. There are many, I remember the World Cup shortly before October the 7th. It was I think it was in which Spain won for women, the World Cup for women, and there were some fans, women fans, girl fans who wanted to go there. Then they were denied it. They were denied exit by the Israeli military to watch a football tournament. So all these stories and this reality has been shrugged off by the international community. So you're talking about a completely devastated scene that is now lying in ruins. You're talking about more than 220 sports facilities that have been destroyed, nearly 150 football facilities that have been destroyed, including 9 of Gaza stadia. At the same time, this is an underestimation. I can tell you, Leyla, from the times we've been exchanging messages, many times it wasn't reported. I was telling you about this particular player, and you told me no one talked about it. And you said, Leyla, no, this player has been killed. He's my neighbor. This player has been killed. I've known about him. And we broke many stories together. We broke the story about the killing of Mohammed Barakat, Gaza's legend and first centurion, of course. No one cared about it. No one cared about it. So if we talk about this destruction and this vast carnage, unfathomable carnage of sports, then the question is not only expelling expelling Israel from FIFA and UEFA and international football competitions, but who will support football and sports to revive again in Gaza? That's the main question. Why did you take the players out? Why are you not even caring about these players whose dreams have been crushed? Leyla, just one last point about this, and
Take your
everybody
time.
who's listening, just about this, you have to know that the football community in Gaza, particularly among players, they are just youngsters. Most of them are youngsters from 17 to 23. It's very rare to find a player or players or a team that which like whose age would be like from age range would be from 27 or above. No, that is not normal in Gaza, because we have the love towards football. A lot of players until this moment, and I'm talking to my family through video, you can see in the street for like little kids playing football. I can see that the football courts, five-a-side football courts that have been bombed deliberately and frequently over the course of the genocide, they are still lively and vibrant and bustling with the players and those like little kids and youngsters who are playing, and adults even who are playing every time, every now and then on these football courts. But who cares? That's the question. And what will we do to help sports revive in Gaza? Because I talked to the officials, and the officials simply, it's their right to feel despair. It's their right to feel pessimistic about the future of football again. Because when I talked to them, I remember this very well, very vividly, when I wanted to ask someone about one of the officials about one of the tragedies about sports, and he told me, "I'm sorry, I don't want to talk. What do you want me to talk about? I'm not going to talk about anything at all, because if we want to rebuild sports again or football again, we need more than a decade, and no one is caring about us. Not FIFA, not UEFA, and all of them are just or have just been built on the basis of helping Israel in everything and of ignoring the plight of Palestinians." So I understand the frustration, and I should be, as someone who has seen his neighbors, his friends, and everyone who have been extraordinary players, and I've been in talk with them over the course of this genocide, and they tell me how much they miss football. For 2 years, they haven't kicked a ball, which is for me insane, unbelievably insane. And they can tell me that they are losing the passion. They still have a bit of passion, a glimmer of passion, however, or a glimmer of hope. However, they have lost everything. So what will we do for them if just Leyla or well, a few people have been given attention to these players and reporting on this tragedy, which is something I never wanted to report, and I think I should be standing in a football stadium reporting on how the players play the game, how about the rivalry, about how the weekends are spent in Gaza, how every fan is roaring in Gaza, how the fans are imitating their favorite players' celebrations. That's what I should report in. Why should I report in this? And we're seeing football academies being wiped out entirely. Football games that are no longer taking place. This is another season in Gaza without football at all. I still saw yesterday when Atletico Madrid played Real Madrid and Real Madrid were crushed 5-2. I still saw from Gaza the images. There are still fans who are watching Real Madrid, who are cheering on Real Madrid. But why no one is caring about it? But what we have in return is that Real Madrid is throwing, or the stewards that are throwing the Palestinian flag. Florentino Perez is taking part in genocidal companies, and we're seeing complete or outright disappointment towards the Palestinian football. So this is the tragedy. The dimensions are surely unlimited, and this sporting tragedy is underestimated at the moment because it's way higher than the numbers we have, over 800 athletes. I've talked to the Palestinian Football Association, the official football association, and I talked to them and I told them that your numbers are sometimes wrong and that you haven't counted every player that I'm aware of. And they told me, we know that, and we count on you, and we count also in what you are figuring out here in Gaza. Or there in Gaza. That was like nearly when I was in Gaza. Now I'm following up with people in Gaza. I'm following up with players to know more from them about any other casualties among the footballing communities. But it's just unfathomable beyond words. I can't hear you, muted.
Sorry. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really, I mean, one doesn't have any more words to say after hearing it from you yourself. I know we have been in touch with the last few years and heard the worst stories about not just athletes, but the whole background of what's happening in Gaza. And like I said before, if this happened to any other player or any other person in the world, and like Shireen, pointed out before, is just plain racism, not caring about lives because, yeah, they're from Palestine. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to try to switch now to make a few questions from the people who have been watching us. And Kat, I think more one directed to you. Why hasn't the Palestinian FA taken the case to the Court of Arbitration for Sports?
Yes, I explained this. There are no mechanisms really existing. This is a private arbitration and a private justice system. It means that you have to first exhaust internal remedies in FIFA that exist and the dispute settlements, and then you can only go with a decision. If you are unsatisfied, you can go and complain, but FIFA is not making a decision. And without decision, we have nothing to start the process with. If we went now to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, they would just say, well, FIFA is working on it and they have transferred it from this committee to that committee, and, so they are working on it. And the truth is that what they are working on in relation to disciplinary sanctions and illegal settlement clubs can be decided in 7 days, but they're dragging. And we know why. So there is nothing. We are basically, hands are blocked completely. They blocked our access to justice.
Thank you.
They should. That's why in May our proposal to FIFA Congress was just make a decision. That's all that we are asking. Just make a decision. It's been already sitting on your table, one for 13 years, and the other one, for almost a year. So just make a decision, and they still didn't make a decision. That was in May. They always have some excuse.
So what we have been asking the most, and I believe it's because people want to do something, is what is the most effective way to action now? What can we recommend fans to do right now for effective response and get UEFA to finally set that meeting to have a vote on banning Israel? Anybody who would like to answer to that one?
Direct action, direct action, direct action, direct action, direct action. Think when you get up in the morning, what can I do today? Right? And if I can do anything when I get up this morning to prevent an Israeli team taking part in any sport anywhere in the world, I will do it. Direct action. Stop the Tour de France. Make that a start. I don't know when the Tour de France, just like the Vuelta was in Spain. Cancel it. Stand in the road. If you don't hurt anybody. I mean, I don't want cyclists crashing over cliffs and things or whatever. But we the people we can say, we're not waiting for FIFA. What? So I forgot. What Dr. Kat was saying. I couldn't agree with you more. They will sit there. They'll go, oh, we're looking at it. Next May. Oh, we're still looking at it. Oh, we'll have a look at it next year. Oh, they'll do nothing. They're paid to do nothing. That's their job, is to support and be complicit in the genocide and keep it going until it is over. And the United States of America and Israel have cleansed the Palestinians from their homeland. No, direct action. I support Palestine action.
Yes.
And just to add, in 2015, we had a so-called World Cup qualifying ice hockey match in Cape Town. And a number of activists actually threw marbles onto the ice rink back then to interrupt and disrupt. I got some bruises for that one, and quite happy to have been involved and not apologetic about it. But also in terms of inaction, we as a country that's taken Israel to the ICJ for its genocide are extremely embarrassed by the South African Football Association, so much so that we've had engagements. We've met the president of the South African Football Association, and eventually about 2 weeks ago, we actually put Danny Jordan's face on a billboard written "Safa's deathly silent on the genocide." I think it's important to put people's faces out there and hold them accountable as individuals as well as organizations. It may be uncomfortable, but the fact of the matter is there's a genocide happening. And I think any and all methods that can be used to apply pressure on the football associations and those decision makers needs to be done. Thanks.
Just really quickly,
Eh,
Leyla, if I may, in terms of
así es,
also other types of
así es.
action, if
Am,
you, oh, sorry, Nika will go first.
Nicola?
Está bien. Mira, quiero pedirle a todos ustedes, principalmente aquellos que hablan español y que nos puedan ayudar, y por eso también era que necesitábamos la visita de Roger también acá. Nosotros estamos iniciando una campaña para sacar a Israel perdón, al Estado criminal de la Conmebol, que lo ingresaron en el año 2024. Ese Estado criminal no pertenece a América Latina ni tiene por qué estar en la Conmebol. Eso es lo primero, y vamos a iniciar con los deportistas una acción en América Latina para expulsar a los infanticidas de la Conmebol. Eso es algo que les quiero pedir. Y lo segundo, si me permiten, preguntarle al hermano Abubaker, بجوز انت سمعت عن الاخ رمسي صالح، سيادة الكرد، محمد سوركي، سمعت عنهم، جمال سكوت. Perdón, le pregunto si escuchó hablar de algunos jugadores míos que yo he perdido el contacto con ellos definitivamente. Entonces pienso que pueden estar muertos. Y por eso que le pregunto.
Was the question tailored at me, I think?
Abubaker,
Ah,
he
But I
asked
didn't
if you,
understand it, I'm sorry.
انت
he
ما
asked,
تحكي عرب؟ سألتك بالعرب اخوي. اذا
Yeah,
انت سمعت عن رمسي صالح، سيادة
yeah,
الكرد، محمد سوركي، جمال سكوت، كانوا لاعبين في المنتخب العالمي الفلسطيني اللي دربت انا، وبعدين ما سمعت ولا شيء عنهم. انا بفكر ان شاء الله لا، اما افكر بجوز صار شيء معهم قتلوهم، ما بعرف عنهم.
I think I'll answer in English,
Yes.
بجاوبك بالعربي so everyone gets to know what you're talking about. So he's asking about three great players who participated in, or very well-known players in the Palestinian community who were a part of the Palestinian national team. And he's trying to learn the news of them. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to tell you that we haven't heard anything about every player. There are some players whom we've been asking about since this Holocaust started. However, we haven't got to know anything about them. But my understanding is that Ramzi Saleh is okay, and I think Mohammed work is okay, but the other player have no idea what has happened to him during this genocide. So I think Ramsey and Mohammed are okay. I think both of them are okay, but the other player, we have no idea about them. But I'll also make sure that they are okay. But I'm following up with the other people. But unfortunately, connecting with the people in Gaza amid the constant blackouts, telecommunication blackouts, is absolutely cumbersome. And that's why we are still lacking a lot of resources and a lot of information to gather, and we can't connect the dots all the time to tell the outside world or to even do the right or to have the right statistics about the death toll among the players. But as far as I'm concerned, the first two players are okay. The third, I have no idea about them.
Shireen, you wanted to have a moment to speak. Nicola, by the way,
شكرا.
I do have
الله يرضى عليك.
I do have the contact of Ramsi Saleh, so I will give you it later. But he is okay. I don't know about the rest of the players, but I will share with you his contact. Luego te pasaré el contacto porque sé que Ramsi Saleh está bien.
شكرا. شكرا. Gracias. Thank you.
You're welcome. Shireen, you wanted to have a moment to speak.
Yeah, just really quickly, we've talked a little bit about changing narratives and doing this thing. There are ways, even if you legacy mainstream media, and I speak predominantly in Canada, United States, and in Europe, don't amplify these stories. There are individual independent media places that are doing that. The stories of Charlotte Phillips, for example, Valerie Tarazi, who's a swimmer who represents Palestine. Charlotte is the goalkeeper for the women's national team. They're active. I think this is really important to keep doing that. And also, if someone is reporting in a nuanced fashion, amplify that. And please, I cannot tell you enough to write the federations. We do not look and cannot look to institutions and federations to be bastions of peace and justice in sport. They absolutely do not do that. We are not looking for FIFA to be a moral compass or UEFA. That's not going to happen. What we have to do is pressure them. And as individuals in whatever industry we are, there is power here. And that's the thing that makes the change. So share information. Make sure your information is sourced, please. I'm a journalism professor, so that makes me crazy when it's not done. Find your sources, amplify story, like Abubaker's testimonies and reporting, even under egregious conditions, is completely legitimate. Make sure you do that. And I cannot state the importance of that in places where we feel isolated and that we're silenced. I do want to say lastly, in these places and media networks, there are people who are working diligently to try to change. There really are. You just don't hear enough of them. So let me assure you, there are people trying.
I'm sorry to jump in here. I'll have to jump in and say something. I don't know what to say, but I've just received the news that the captain of the Ittihad al-Shujai has been killed today. And his name is Abdullah Abu Ata. So he plays for Ittihad al-Shujai. The club has been flattened since the beginning. So he was just killed a few hours ago while being displaced from Gaza City. I know his family and his relatives. I don't know what a coincidence is this is to talk about this topic and then a player is killed. I mean,
it's like I was talking to a friend who is also involved in sports journalism, and he's been keeping up what's been happening in the Palestinian football scene and sports and the genocide in general. And I don't think we will have ever imagined in our lifetime that our social media will kind of become a graveyard for athletes in such a way. And it's really
just
shocking.
unfathomable. I don't know what kind of coincidence this is, but it may represent something. But I think it can confirm that this player has been killed while being displaced from his home. He was planning to go to Deir al-Balah to join his relatives. I know his relatives are taking shelter in Deir al-Balah near my family's house, but I mean, it's just devastating. I don't know what to say anymore. But
This also brings to my mind the fact that not only we saw FIFA and UEFA taking action against Russia just within its invasion of Ukraine, I think it was 3-4 days maximum, but we also just a month later saw UEFA Foundation supporting with huge donations to Ukrainian families, something that has taken 2 years for UEFA to announce. And that puts a lot into perspective. It's not just the athletes, but their families, that their friends, that it's a collective suffering that all the sporting bodies and football world has been ignoring. And it just can, I mean, when Roger said, just take action, that's exactly the message. You wake up in the morning, you receive this news, you think, you don't even need to think it's your family going through this for you to say, okay, I'm going to present myself at tonight's game and I'm going to raise a flag. I'm going to just disrupt the match that is going. I'm just going to fight the narrative that institutions and clubs and the sporting bodies, again, are inflicting on us. And I need to make this stop. And I believe that more voices will add and more and more and more. But it needs to happen now. This cannot wait any longer. And I will appreciate if all
he's
of
a
you...
veteran. He's a veteran. Can I show his photo, please?
Sure.
Okay, can you give me the host so I can share the screen?
Can we help him, Karen?
Yeah, you can either ask me or I'm just going to work to get you access. Just a second. Sorry about that.
Shireen, he's been playing football for over 10 years. And Millie, who's playing for his club, Had Shujai, which has been leveled to the ground when the genocide began.
You should be able to now.
Do you see it now?
We see it.
And that's him. That's him. And I think he's almost 35 years old. I think so. And I'll show him while in a football jersey with his club.
Thank you so much, Abubaker, by the way, for showing his picture, because it's also very important that we remember these are not just numbers. They are
the fact that we've received this news while doing this is
very
absolutely devastating beyond words. I don't know.
It shows how important it is to take action now and have these talks. It really does, and how urgent the matter is.
Can you see the screen? That's him on the right. That's him on the right. Can you see the screen?
We can.
We can see it.
That's him on the screen on the right. That's a previous photo of him back in 2013. One of the articles that was written about him in Arabic by the local news outlets. That's his brother. I'm not sure if his brother is still alive, but we have confirmation that he was killed. That was when he was, I think, 21 years old, 22 years old, something like this. But anyways, I'm just so sorry.
It's beyond heart-wrenching, and I think it's left us all speechless at the moment. But it's just the reality that we have been facing, especially in the last few years. And like Abubaker said earlier, the question is not when UEFA, FIFA, and other sporting bodies are finally going to decide that we can no longer give a platform to Israel. We can no longer let sports to be used, a force of good to be used to whitewash crimes. But why it hasn't happened already? Not just in the last 2 years. See Roger with the Palestinian national team T-shirt.
I don't know what I'm saying. I have no idea what I'm saying, but
I mean, there's one point in this, and I think that the targeting of football players has also been purposeful, because I remember Mohammed Barakat, who was killed with his entire family, 3 children and 1 woman. And Mohammed, just to give you a bit of context about him, he was, he was opposing Hamas as a political wing. Just to give you a little bit of context about him, which I think I shouldn't share, but anyways, he was opposing Hamas. And then an Israeli warplane, Apache helicopter, deliberately targeted his apartment in Gaza City. That was, I think, nearly a year ago, and killed his 3 daughters. The 3 daughters were under 10 years old, and his wife, who was, I think, pregnant at that time, and also him. So when you look at the targeting of these players, there's no, I mean, we're not defending this, but there's no justification at all. There's no justification at all. I mean, it's, I don't know who's next, but I think whatever we do, I know what we do is really great and is really important, but who gives those people or those players lives again? Who gives them their dreams again back to them? I mean, it's, I actually don't know, but I think football has lost its sense. I believe so.
It's definitely lost its sense. And I remember it was a year ago, where you shared your experience because you used it to support Chelsea. I remember. And what happened with that?
Yeah, it's a Zionist club. It's a very despicable club that even whose directors have denied Israel's targeting of children. And we have football reporters who have spoken up about genocide rhetoric, like Jacob in The Guardian, who reports in Chelsea. There's no accountability, there's no punishment for these maniacs at all. But what you have is that they have shielding from these media outlets all the time. So I'm beyond enraged, and I'm sorry if I hurt anyone with these words, but this session shouldn't have been held now. It should have been held many months ago. I'm sure some of you have occurred, but we should have occurred much earlier than that. I believe so.
And that's gonna be just not just in the sports and then for the sports people, but in a stain in humanity. What were we doing while all of this was happening, and not just now, but forever? And we shall have a spoken up for Palestinian lives forever, indeed. I would like to close the session, giving you a minute to each one of you, delivering a message for everybody watching. And please, Ajamu, if you want to start with it, let's have each one of us a message to be delivered to everybody watching.
I think this is that what just happened basically confirms to all of us the absolute importance of the work that we're involved in, the imperative that we have to stop this horrific crime. So in a way, it's the universe talking to us, if one might want to look at it in that way. It should be something that will reconfirm for ourselves our commitment to this work, our commitment to go forward from this webinar and to construct a process by which we just don't have the webinar, as important as it's been, but that we move toward consolidating a structural reaction, a structural development in which we can continue to coordinate and communicate among all of the various elements represented here or as speakers and then the audience, to keep the pressure on the authorities, to construct messages for the masses of the people, but in a organized and strategically focused way. So this has to be the task, my friends. This is not going to stop until the people themselves stop it. So we ask again for people to understand that, you know, we have certain historic responsibilities, and that one of them is to try to become as organized as possible in order to be the best and most effective weapons of solidarity for the Palestinian people.
Thank you, Ajamu. Robert, if you want to continue.
Yeah, it just occurred to me that I can't call this person a friend, but I had a bit of a confrontation about 10 days ago with someone who challenged me about Israel's right to exist. And in that context, I want to say that obviously the genocide is something that needs to be stopped immediately, but we can't stop there either, that this world cannot survive with any state that is an apartheid state. We cannot have apartheid states on planet Earth. And so the fight that Ajamu's talking about won't end anytime soon. But it is something that I think we all have in our hearts, and know that Israel, as it stands today, does not have a right to exist. It does not. We cannot support any notion of apartheid anywhere. So having said that, and again, I thank so many of you for being here, and I've learned a lot from all of you. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to exchange. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Nicola, si quieres continuar.
¿Me dices a mí?
Sí, para que des un mensaje de 1 minuto a la audiencia antes de que terminemos.
Está bien. Sí, sí. No hay que dejar de luchar nunca. Y lo voy a hacer recordando las palabras de Silvio Rodríguez, ¿no? En una canción, Silvio Rodríguez decía, hay hombres que luchan un día y son buenos. Hay hombres que luchan muchos años y son muy buenos, pero hay quienes luchan toda la vida. Esos son los imprescindibles. Debemos luchar todos los días, no solo por el pueblo palestino, no solo por el pueblo palestino. Hay muchos pueblos que están pasando días muy difíciles. No nos olvidemos de Níger, no nos olvidemos de Burkina Faso, no nos olvidemos de Malí, no nos olvidemos que hay flota de ese estado padre de los crímenes en la humanidad, que es Estados Unidos, que quiere atacar a Venezuela. No nos olvidemos el bloqueo a Cuba, no nos olvidemos los golpes de Estado, los crímenes de lesa humanidad diario. Estados Unidos, como muy bien lo decía recién el compañero cuando habló sobre que había que condenar también a Estados Unidos tiene más de 1.250 bases militares en el mundo. Es el fiscal, es el juez, el gendarme, el verdugo, es el asesino de la humanidad. Eso tenemos, es un deber nuestro, no solo el pueblo palestino, de todos los seres humanos. Es la humanidad la que está en peligro y es la humanidad a la que nosotros tenemos que apelar. Agradezco a todos ustedes esa tremenda solidaridad. Vuelvo a repetir, el sentimiento más hermoso que puede tener un ser humano es la solidaridad. Yo te doy gracias por esta oportunidad de estar con ustedes y quizás sería bueno crear un chat para mantenernos coordinados en el futuro porque hay muchas cosas por hacer y nosotros en América Latina vamos a necesitar el apoyo y la palabra de ustedes, de cada uno de ustedes. Los necesitamos. Así que bueno, vuelvo a reiterar las gracias, compañeros. Gracias.
Gracias, Nicola. Kat?
Not much to add, really, except for everybody can do something, absolutely everybody, and it can be meaningful. Stop, if they don't ban Israel, then stop consuming football content. How much do you really need it? Stop consuming football content, boycott their sponsors, boycott their games, don't subscribe for the broadcasters, just stop going to the football matches. This isn't, I know football is important, but there are some other things that are more important. And that would be how every individual can really contribute. And together and united and in big numbers, they can make a huge difference. Take the oxygen out of them.
Jill, please. Thank you, Kat.
Yeah, I mean, Kat's probably just said what I was going to say, so I would echo all that. And also platform Palestinian voices. I think, platform the stories of athletes that have been murdered, like we've just heard about from Abubaker, but also I think something you constantly say, Leyla, platform them while they're alive. I think that we can all be guilty of only eulogizing Palestinian athletes, but actually there are so many athletes that are still alive, and it's really important that we still support them in different ways. So yeah, just keep sharing those.
You're right in this. You're right in this, Jill. I'm sorry to cut you off here, but you have to know something, and I have to break this with you because I'm someone who's worked with the so-called pro-Palestinian media outlets, but I can tell you from my side that the likes of Al Jazeera and other media outlets that supposedly pro-Palestinian are not interested. I can tell you from here, okay? So they're not even interested to talk about these deaths. They're not even interested to talk about this sporting tragedy. So I know other writers who tried to give or shed light on this appalling sporting tragedy, but all of their pitches have been rejected. I've been trying with them to do something on that, but all of them have rejected that. What these so-called pro-Palestinian media outlets, which are westernized media outlets, they are trying to pick up the stories that would get the most amount of attention. That's what they are focused on. They're not focused on eulogizing or giving credit to the Palestinian players who have been killed. So that's where we are. I just have to be very honest in this one because you need to know that.
No,
We are
I appreciate that.
honesty.
Yeah.
Please continue, Jill.
No, I mean, I think that's absolutely like a really valid point, and it's important to share that. I think, yeah, I suppose I feel like some of the Palestinian athletes, you know, who do have a presence on social media, I think sometimes people can be guilty of not sharing their stories. And even then, maybe they can do their own bit to create demand for that. But I think absolutely platform those voices as much as you can. But I think it's a really important point that you just raised about the complicity there of the media.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much. And Bram, if you want to continue.
No, thank you. I just want to reassure you, Abubaker, that we're not in the ambulance service and we're not undertakers. We have no intention of allowing this to continue, and we have no sense of worth and it really hurts us deeply to be dealing with this situation where the genocide continues unhindered. I know that when I was younger, my father had to smuggle out photos and videos of what was happening in the apartheid regime. Nowadays, it's live streamed. Everybody can see it, and no one can claim not to know what's going on. And I think that makes it extremely painful, because it's as if these forces are trying to show us that they can get away with it. But indeed, they won't get away with it, certainly not for long. And if the sponsors and if the club managements and the big bosses think they can continue to host Israeli teams and Israel, it's the fans, the people, and us on the streets who are going to disrupt and make it so difficult that eventually the sponsors will be. And in fact, by the way, there was a time when we had a campaign in South Africa called the Boycott Woolworths campaign, and this company brought Pharrell Williams to promote them during this Boycott Woolworths campaign. And eventually, after spending hundreds of millions of rands, which is like millions of dollars, to get Pharrell Williams here, they had to hide his every movement because they knew protesters were going to go wherever he went. And eventually it was quite an embarrassment, and it brought international media to our campaign. And I'm flagging this because there's no value in a sponsor sponsoring a soccer team or an athlete that can't attend events, that can't perform and move around, because it's going to be disrupted. And already we're seeing it. So we'll do our best, and we'll be there for you in all corners and all places where we can. And our hearts and prayers are with you.
Thank you so much. I'll have to leave everyone. Thank you for what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing, and I hope that we can pressure them enough to do something. And hopefully what's more important than expelling Israel from FIFA is, of course, to stop the genocide, but also to help the Palestinian athletes whose dreams have been decimated. And I forgot to mention something, which is, because I did a story on that, which is like the amputee footballers. I've met so many players. They have been amputated during this genocide, and they had to change and switch their positions on the football pitch, but they are still playing football. So you've got to know that this tragedy is absolutely boundless. And thank you, everyone. Bye.
Abubaker. Nathan, if you want to continue.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much, everyone. I want to just sort of emphasize the point Abubaker just made about the fact that the genocide is the point, right? But I want to conclude with a reminder of why sport is such an urgent site of resistance, why we should be talking about sport as we are. The South African example shows us that although it can seem superficially trivial in the context of genocide sport, it has this outsized tactical importance, right? That's what we're dealing with here. And we are on the verge of banning Israel from UEFA, which was unthinkable to me, at least. I don't know, even like a month ago, we could even dream of that. Italy and Norway have the most leverage, I think, because they're going to be playing these matches. So if they were to do anything independently, it would make all the difference, right? But I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that if we are somehow able to ban Israel from global sport, but particularly UEFA and World Cup qualifiers in football, that could actually be the single most impactful avenue available in any context right now to ending this genocide. And such a move would provide would provide cover to everyone else struggling for even more materially significant forms of prohibition, like sanctions, embargoes, even outright intervention, right? And so to finish, like, we have to see these as the stakes. And that means we have to do everything in our power to prohibit Israel's participation in global sport right now. And this is literally like a 2-week window, maybe even, that we have to make this happen. It has to happen this instant.
Thank you, Nathan. Shireen?
Just sort of to repeat what Jill was saying before of amplifying the people that are there. And on the topic of Al Jazeera and mainstream legacy, I work in the space full time, and when my pitches are rejected, I go independent. So if there's anybody in US, Western Europe, or the United States, we have a coalition. Canadian Journalists for Peace, for Justice in Palestine are active. Let us know. We can connect you with independent media who are willing to do these things. And on that note, if I had pitched, or other journalists had pitched mainstream legacy media, it was the people resisting. For example, the reporting on the Davis Cup in Halifax was only made general and widespread because of the protests against it. It became news. Sports is a vehicle. It's an important vehicle, and it has always been a place of resistance. There's precedent for this. To reconnect those two things is extremely important. On this level, yes, the priority will always be valuing Palestinian lives, ending genocide, but the way that stories and sharing stories has a power to help in this process. It may feel small at times, but there's people who may not know enough, and you introduce them to work on justice and Palestinian liberation through sport. Again, amplifying things like Athletes for Peace. I remember Athletes for Ceasefire over a year and a half ago. Doing that, there are people that are in silos, and one of the ways that it's possible for Israeli regimes and Zionist machines to silence us is to isolate us. So lean into community, connect with people. This particular event is really important. I've been messaging people while I've been listening to say, connect with me, let's do this. Academics, journalists, activists, players. For this particular cause, there's no reason we're not all on the same team, because we are.
Thank you so much, Shireen. That was really important. And Roger, if you want to close our webinar, please.
Sure. Thank you for having me on. It's been great to be with everybody here. All right, I wrote a song recently, and I've just pulled up the lyrics. I'm not going to go through it. It's rather a long song. It's called Sumud, which is, I know, but maybe not everybody does, means steadfast perseverance, and particularly in this context, in resistance to the occupation of Palestine. So that's the name of the song. This is just the last verse, but it's not about sport. And it goes, when voices join in harmony, we will make a joyful sound. We will follow our own moral compass. We won't let their sleight of hand trump us. And we will find 10,000 new voices in every crowd. And when all those new voices join us in harmony, standing shoulder to shoulder from the river to the sea, people from every nation will hear that joyful sound. Ordinary people just standing their ground, and together, these ordinary people, together, they will turn this ship around. And that's it. That's the last verse. So again, thank you.
Very nice.
I will just say a few words following Roger's song. We saw what the Italians made last week, and they showed us when people unite, they can restore power. So I think our task here is that same energy to pour it out on football and demand Israel's suspension, not tomorrow, not in 2026, but now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Just Be Advocates, for organizing this. Thank you all for your voices, and let's make it. We can make it. I believe we can make it.
Bravo.
Thank you, Leyla. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.